Under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights in a downtown Boston grocery store, a woman collapses between shelves of bread and milk. Before her head can strike the concrete floor, she is caught by a man whose presence makes strangers cross to the other side of the street. When he sees the bruises circling her throat like a necklace of violence, his calm shatters into something lethal. She is starving. She is terrified. And the man now holding her upright has just decided she will never go back to whoever put those marks on her skin. This is a story about falling into darkness and finding it safer than the light ever was. If you want to know how a library archivist hiding behind turtlenecks became the protected wife of Boston's most dangerous man, stay with me until the end. Like this video, comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And let's begin. And the fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that particular electric buzz that made Alara Wren's skull feel like it was being split with a dull blade. She stood in the cereal aisle of Murphy's Market on Boylston Street, one hand braced against a shelf of generic cornflakes, the other clutching a shopping basket that held exactly 3 items: a loaf of white bread, a carton of eggs, and a half-gallon of milk. The basket trembled in her grip. Her vision swam. She blinked hard, trying to force the grocery store back into focus, but the edges of her sight kept blurring like someone had smeared Vaseline across a camera lens. The floor tilted beneath her sneakers. Her knees buckled. Not here. Not now. Not in public. She locked her legs and forced herself upright, breathing through her nose the way she'd learned to do when the room started spinning. 4 seconds in. Hold. 4 seconds out. Her ribs screamed in protest. The pain was sharp and specific, radiating from the left side where Bram had shoved her into the kitchen counter 2 nights ago because she'd asked if they could order pizza instead of cooking. Alara adjusted the high collar of her black turtleneck, tugging it higher even though it was already pressed against the bottom of her jaw. The fabric was soft, expensive. Bram had bought it for her last month along with 4 others in different colors after he'd grabbed her by the throat during an argument about her working late at the library. He'd apologized afterward, cried even, and then handed her a shopping bag from Nordstrom like cashmere could erase fingerprints. She wore turtlenecks every day now. The basket slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. The eggs cracked. Milk sloshed inside the carton. Alara stared down at the mess and felt something inside her chest crack open just like those eggs, spilling out all the things she'd been keeping contained for months. She was so tired. She was so hungry. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a full meal. Bram controlled the grocery money. He checked receipts. He weighed her once a week on the bathroom scale and told her she was getting soft, that men didn't stay with women who let themselves go. So Alara had learned to eat in secret, a granola bar stolen from the library break room, half a sandwich from a coworker's discarded lunch, black coffee, to trick her stomach into thinking it was full. It wasn't working anymore. The floor rushed up to meet her. She didn't feel herself falling so much as she felt the world tilt sideways, and then there were hands catching her before her skull could crack against the tile. Strong hands, steady, the kind of grip that didn't fumble or hesitate. Easy. The voice was low, textured like gravel wrapped in silk, and it came from somewhere above her head. Alara's vision cleared just enough to register details: a charcoal wool coat, the faint scent of cedar, and something darker she couldn't name, and eyes the color of a frozen lake in January staring down at her with an intensity that should have frightened her. She tried to speak. Her mouth wouldn't cooperate. The man holding her upright shifted his grip, one arm sliding beneath her shoulders, the other steadying her at the waist. He moved with the kind of precision that came from practice, like he'd done this before, caught falling things and kept them from breaking. "When did you last eat?" Alara blinked up at him. His face was all sharp angles and brutal elegance, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass. Silver-threaded dark hair swept back from a broad forehead. He looked like he was somewhere in his 50s, maybe older, and he wore his age the way expensive suits wore tailoring, everything exactly where it needed to be. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place, pale blue, cold, and currently fixed on her face with the kind of focus that made her feel like he could see through skin and bone straight into the parts of herself she kept hidden. Her voice came out hoarse. "I'm fine." "You're not." He said it plainly, without inflection, and somehow that made it worse than if he'd sounded concerned. This wasn't concern. This was assessment. Clinical. Accurate. Alara tried to pull away, but her legs had turned into something unstable and liquid. The man didn't let go. Instead, he shifted his weight and kept her upright with an ease that suggested her 110 pounds was nothing to him. Let me help you to a bench. I don't need... You collapsed in the middle of a grocery store. His tone didn't change. Still flat, still certain. You need to sit down before you go down again, and this time I might not catch you. There was something about the way he said it, like he was solving a logistics problem rather than dealing with a stranger's fainting spell, that made Alara stop arguing. She let him guide her toward the front of the store where a wooden bench sat beneath a bulletin board covered in flyers for lost cats and yoga classes. He lowered her onto the bench with the same controlled precision he'd used to catch her. Then he crouched in front of her, bringing those ice-blue eyes level with hers. Stay here. It wasn't a question. Alara nodded because her brain still wasn't working properly, and because there was something in his voice that suggested he didn't make requests he expected people to refuse. He straightened and disappeared down one of the aisles. Alara sat on the bench, breathing carefully, trying to convince her body that it wasn't actually dying even though it felt like it might be. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't need to look at it to know it was Bram. He always knew when something was wrong, like he had some kind of radar tuned specifically to her mistakes. She pulled out her phone. Where are you? You said 20 minutes. It's been 35. Answer me. Her hands started shaking. The man returned before she could type a response. He was carrying a bottle of orange juice, a protein bar, and a banana. He unscrewed the cap on the juice and handed it to her. Drink. Alara took the bottle because refusing felt more dangerous than complying. The juice was cold and sweet, and her stomach clenched around it like a fist. Slowly, he said, watching her. You'll make yourself sick. She lowered the bottle and stared at him. He was still crouching in front of her, balanced on the balls of his feet with his forearms resting on his knees. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver in his stubble, the way his coat was cut to accommodate shoulders that suggested he spent time doing something more physical than sitting behind a desk. Thank you, she managed. He didn't acknowledge the gratitude. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, and his gaze dropped from her face to her throat. Alara's hand flew up to her collar, tugging it higher. Too late. When the man's eyes returned to hers, something in them had changed. The cold assessment had sharpened into something with edges. His jaw tightened. Who did that to you? I don't know what you... Don't. The single word cut through her deflection like a blade. I saw the bruises when I caught you. They're fresh. Maybe a day old. Someone put their hands around your throat and squeezed hard enough to leave marks. Alara's breath caught. She wanted to lie. She wanted to smile and say she was clumsy, that she'd tripped, that it was nothing. But the way he was looking at her made it clear that lies wouldn't work. He'd seen too much. He knew too much. It's complicated, she whispered. It's simple. His voice dropped lower, quieter, and somehow that made it more dangerous. Someone hurt you. I want to know who. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Why did he care? Why was this stranger with his expensive coat and his frozen eyes and his hands that had caught her before she hit the ground sitting here asking questions that no one else had bothered to ask in 8 months? The man studied her for a long moment. Then he said, Because I watched my mother get beaten to death when I was 9 years old, and I made a promise that day that I would never stand by and do nothing again. The words landed between them like stones dropped into still water. Alara's phone buzzed again, louder this time, insistent. The man's gaze flicked to the phone in her lap, then back to her face. That him? She nodded. What's his name? Bram. Bram Calder. And what does Bram do when you don't answer his texts fast enough? Alara's throat closed. She couldn't answer that. Couldn't put into words the way Bram's voice changed when he was angry. How the air in their apartment would shift and thicken until she could barely breathe. How he'd back her into corners and whisper that she was stupid, ungrateful, worthless, and then grab her face and force her to look at him while he said it. The man seemed to read the answer in her silence. Give me your phone. What? Your phone? Give it to me. Alara stared at him. I can't. You can. He held out his hand, palm up, waiting. And you will. There was something in his voice that made her fingers move before her brain could catch up. She placed the phone in his palm. He stood, scrolled through her messages with Bram, and his expression went flat in a way that was somehow worse than anger. Then he typed something and hit send. What did you... Her question died when Bram's name lit up the screen with an incoming call. The man answered it. Bram called her. His voice was pleasant, conversational, completely devoid of warmth. My name is Nikolai Weyer. I'm calling to inform you that Alara won't be coming home. Alara couldn't hear Bram's response, but she could imagine it. The confusion. Then the rage. Nikolai's expression didn't change. That's not your concern anymore. As of this moment, Alara is under my protection. If you attempt to contact her, follow her, or come within 100 yards of her, I will consider it a threat, and I handle threats very personally. The voice on the other end of the line rose. Nikolai waited for it to finish. I don't care what you think you deserve. I don't care what explanations you believe you're owed. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your apartment, pack Alara's belongings, and leave them outside your door. One of my people will collect them tonight. If anything is missing or damaged, I'll take it out of your skin. Do you understand? Silence. Good. Don't call this number again. He ended the call and handed the phone back to Alara. She took it with numb fingers. What did you just do? I took away his access to you. You can't just... She stopped, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. You don't know what he'll do. He's going to come after me. He's going to... No. Nikolai crouched in front of her again, bringing them eye to eye. He won't, because I told him what would happen if he did, and men like Bram are only dangerous when their victims can't fight back. You couldn't fight back. Now you can. I don't even know who you are. I told you. My name is Nikolai Weyer. The name meant nothing to her. She stared at him, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to process the fact that a stranger had just upended her entire life in the span of 5 minutes. Why are you doing this? Because you needed help. He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. And because I have the resources to provide it. What resources? Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of a question he'd been waiting for her to ask. I run an organization in Boston. We handle logistics, distribution, and conflict resolution for people who prefer to operate outside traditional legal channels. He paused. I believe the common term is mafia boss, though I find it reductive. Alara's vision blurred again, but this time it had nothing to do with hunger. You're joking. I'm not. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth of it in the way he held himself, the quality of his clothes, the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd threatened Bram. This wasn't a man who made empty promises. This was someone who had the power to follow through on threats and the experience to know exactly how much pressure to apply. I don't want to be part of anything illegal, she said quietly. You won't be. I'm offering you protection and a safe place to recover. What I do for a living doesn't require your participation or your approval. Then what do you want from me? Nikolai stood and adjusted his coat. Nothing. You eat the food I give you, you sleep in a room with a lock on the door, and when you're strong enough to make decisions about your life, you make them. Until then, you let me handle Bram. It sounded too good to be true. Alara had learned that things that sounded too good to be true usually came with prices that weren't discussed up front. And if I say no, then I'll make sure Bram knows that if he touches you again, he'll lose the use of his hands. Nikolai's tone didn't change. But you'll still be going back to that apartment, and we both know what happens next. Alara's ribs ached. Her throat ached. Her entire body ached with the weight of months spent walking on eggshells and swallowing screams. She thought about Bram's hands. She thought about the turtlenecks in her closet. She thought about the fact that she'd nearly cracked her skull open on a grocery store floor because she'd been too afraid to eat. Okay, she whispered. Nikolai held out his hand. Alara took it and let him pull her to her feet. The car was a black Mercedes sedan with tinted windows and leather seats that probably cost more than Alara made in 3 months. A driver sat behind the wheel, silent and still, eyes forward. Nikolai opened the back door and waited for her to get in. She hesitated. I need to pay for the groceries. I dropped the basket and... It's handled. But, Alara. He said her name with the same calm certainty he'd used for everything else. Get in the car. She got in the car. Nikolai slid in beside her and the driver pulled away from the curb without a word. The city scrolled past the windows, brownstones, traffic lights, people bundled in winter coats hurrying through the November cold. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly the way it had an hour ago when Ilara had left the apartment Bram had insisted they share. Back when her biggest concern was whether she could buy groceries without passing out. Now she was sitting in a luxury sedan next to a man who'd just told her he was a crime boss, and she couldn't decide if she'd been rescued or if she'd just traded one nightmare for another. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My home. It's a penthouse in the Seaport district. You'll have your own room, your own bathroom, and access to anything you need." "And how long am I supposed to stay there?" "As long as it takes." "For what?" Nikolai turned to look at her. In the dim interior of the car, his eyes seemed even paler, like winter light through ice. "For you to stop flinching every time your phone buzzes." Ilara's hand tightened around the phone in her lap. As if on cue, it vibrated with another text from Bram. She didn't read it, couldn't. The words would be the same as they always were: accusations, threats, apologies, promises to change, threats again when the apologies didn't work. Nikolai plucked the phone from her hand, powered it down, and slipped it into his coat pocket. "Hey, you don't need it right now. I'll get you a new number tomorrow. He knows where I work. He knows my schedule. He's going to show up at the library, and he won't. You can't possibly know that. I can." Nikolai's voice remained level. "Because when we arrive at the penthouse, I'm going to make a phone call. By tonight, Bram Calder will understand that coming near you would be the last mistake he ever makes." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it sent a chill down Ilara's spine. "What are you going to do to him?" "Nothing permanent, unless he forces my hand." Ilara stared at her hands, at the way her fingers were knotted together in her lap, and tried to untangle the mess of emotions churning in her chest. Relief, terror, disbelief, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I don't understand why you're helping me. I told you why." "Your mother," the words came out softly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." "Does it stop mattering?" Nikolai was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "No, it doesn't." The rest of the drive passed in silence. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a glass and steel building that overlooked Boston Harbor. The elevator required a key card to access the private level. When the doors opened, Ilara stepped into a space that looked like it had been pulled from an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark hardwood floors, furniture in shades of charcoal and cream, and art on the walls that was probably worth more than her student loans. A woman appeared from a hallway on the left. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun and sharp dark eyes that swept over Ilara with the kind of assessment that felt both clinical and kind. "Mira," Nikolai said. "This is Ilara. She'll be staying with us for a while." Mira nodded once. "Welcome, dear. You look like you could use a hot meal and a good night's sleep." The kindness in her voice was so unexpected that Ilara felt her throat tighten. "I don't want to be any trouble." "You're not trouble." Mira crossed the room and took Ilara's hands in hers. Her grip was warm and firm. "You're a guest, and guests in this house are treated with respect. Come on, I'll show you to your room." Ilara glanced back at Nikolai. He stood near the windows with his hands in his pockets, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "Go," he said quietly. "I have calls to make." Mira led her down a hallway lined with abstract paintings and into a bedroom that was larger than the entire apartment Ilara had shared with Bram. There was a queen-size bed with a white duvet, a reading chair positioned near the window, and a door that led to a private bathroom with marble counters and a shower big enough for 3 people. "There are clothes in the closet," Mira said. "Nikolai keeps a rotation of sizes for situations like this. They might not be a perfect fit, but they'll do until we can get you something better. Bathroom is stocked. Towels are in the cabinet. If you need anything else, just press the intercom button by the door." Ilara turned in a slow circle, trying to process the fact that this was real, that she was actually standing in a stranger's penthouse, being offered safety like it was something simple and easy to give. "Why does he do this?" she asked. Mira paused in the doorway. "Do what?" "Help people." "You said situations like this, like it's happened before." "It has." Mira's expression softened. Nikolai has a particular hatred for men who hurt women. When he finds someone who needs help, he helps. It's not complicated. But he's... Ilara hesitated, unsure how to phrase it. Dangerous? Mira finished. Yes, he is. But not to you. Never to you. She left before Ilara could ask what that meant. Ilara stood alone in the beautiful room with its soft lighting and its view of the harbor. And for the first time in 8 months, she locked a door from the inside and knew that no one would try to break it down. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and cried. She woke to the smell of food, not the burnt toast and instant coffee breakfast she'd learned to survive on, but real food, garlic, butter, something roasting in an oven. Her stomach clenched with hunger so intense it was almost painful. Ilara sat up and realized she'd fallen asleep in her clothes. The room was dark, except for the glow of the city through the windows. She had no idea what time it was. Her phone was gone, confiscated by Nikolai, and there was no clock on the nightstand. She found the bathroom, splashed water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked like hell. Dark circles under her eyes, hollow cheeks, hair tangled from sleeping on it, wet. And her throat. She tugged down the collar of her turtleneck and saw the bruises in full, ugly detail. Purple and yellow and green, the perfect outline of fingers pressed into her skin. Ilara covered them again and left the room. The hallway led back to the main living area. Mira was in the kitchen, stirring something in a large pot on the stove. She looked up when Ilara appeared. Good. You're awake. Sit down. Dinner's almost ready. Ilara perched on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. What time is it? Just after 8. You slept for 3 hours. I didn't mean to... Your body needed it. Mira ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of Ilara, along with a thick slice of bread. Eat slowly. Your stomach won't be used to real food. The soup was chicken and vegetables, rich and hot, and so good that Ilara had to stop herself from inhaling it. She forced herself to eat the way Mira had instructed. Small bites, slow swallows, giving her body time to remember how this worked. Nikolai appeared from another hallway while she was halfway through the bowl. He'd changed out of the wool coat into dark jeans and a black sweater that made his eyes look even paler. He moved through the space with the kind of ease that came from familiarity, pulling a glass from a cabinet and pouring himself 2 fingers of something amber from a crystal decanter. How are you feeling? He asked. Better. Ilara set down her spoon. Thank you for the food and the room and everything. You don't need to thank me. I think I do. Nikolai leaned against the counter, drink in hand, and studied her with that same intense focus. I made some calls. Bram won't be a problem anymore. Ilara's pulse quickened. What does that mean? It means I had a conversation with some people who owed me favors. Bram has been encouraged to leave Boston. If he's smart, he'll take the suggestion. And if he's not, then the encouragement becomes less polite. Ilara wrapped her hands around the soup bowl, absorbing the warmth. I don't know if I should be relieved or terrified. Both is reasonable. She looked up at him. Are you always this blunt? Yes. Most people would lie, pretend they're not as dangerous as they actually are. I'm not most people. Nikolai took a sip of his drink. And I don't see the point in lying to you. You're smart enough to know what I am. Pretending otherwise would be an insult. Mira set another bowl of soup on the counter and gave Nikolai a look that suggested she'd heard this conversation before and didn't entirely approve. Eat, she told Ilara, and ignore him when he gets philosophical. It's what I do. Nikolai's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. Ilara finished her soup while Mira cleaned the kitchen and Nikolai stood nearby, silent and watchful. The scene was so normal. Dinner, warmth, the quiet rhythm of people sharing a space that it made her chest ache. When she was done, Nikolai set down his glass. I need to know what you want to do about work. Ilara blinked. Work? You're a library archivist. You have a supervisor who expects you to show up tomorrow. I can call and explain that you're dealing with a personal emergency, or I can have someone else handle it. Your choice. The fact that he was asking rather than deciding for her made something tight in Ilara's chest loosen slightly. I'll call, she said. Tomorrow. I need to figure out what to say. Tell them the truth. You're safe. You're staying with someone who can protect you, and you'll be back when you're ready. They're going to have questions. Let them ask. Nikolai's tone left no room for argument. Anyone who has a problem with you taking time to recover can take it up with me. Alara almost smiled. You can't threaten my entire workplace. Watch me. This time Mira actually laughed. The days blurred together after that. Alara slept, she ate. She sat in the reading chair by the window and stared out at the harbor, while her body slowly remembered what it felt like to not be afraid every second of every day. Mira brought her meals 3 times a day and never commented on the fact that Alara sometimes cried while eating them. Nikolai appeared in the mornings and evenings, asking if she needed anything, and then disappeared into his office to handle whatever business required his attention. He never pushed, never asked invasive questions, never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond basic courtesy. On the 3rd day, he knocked on her door and handed her a new phone. Your number is the same, he said. I had it transferred. Your contacts are backed up. Bram's number is blocked. Alara took the phone. Did he try to contact me? 23 times in the first 12 hours. Then he stopped. Because you threatened him. Because I made it clear that continuing would have consequences he couldn't afford. She powered on the phone and scrolled through the messages that had come in while she'd been offline. Her supervisor had texted asking if she was okay. 2 coworkers had sent worried messages. Her mother, who Alara hadn't spoken to in 6 months because Bram had slowly isolated her from everyone who cared, had called twice. I need to return these, she said quietly. Take your time. Nikolai left her alone. Alara spent the next hour calling people back and explaining in careful, vague terms that she'd left Bram, that she was staying somewhere safe, and that she'd be back to work soon. Most of them were relieved. A few asked if she needed help. She told them she had it handled and hated how much that sounded like a lie. By the end of the week, her belongings had been delivered to the penthouse. 3 boxes of clothes, books, and personal items that represented everything she owned. Nikolai's people had collected them from Bram's apartment without incident. Alara unpacked slowly, hanging dresses and sweaters in the massive closet, lining up books on the shelf by the window. It felt strange to see her things in this space, like 2 incompatible worlds colliding. That night, Nikolai invited her to have dinner with him in the dining room instead of eating alone in her room. She accepted. The table could have seated 12, but they sat at one end, close enough to talk without shouting across the expanse of polished wood. Mira had made roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables that tasted like something from a restaurant Alara could never afford. Tell me about the library, Nikolai said after they'd been eating in silence for several minutes. Alara glanced up. What do you want to know? What you do there. Why you chose it. She set down her fork. I'm an archivist. I catalog and preserve rare books and historical documents. It's quiet, detailed. No one bothers you if you keep your head down and do good work. You like being invisible. It wasn't a question. I used to, Alara admitted. Now I'm not sure. What changed? You. Nikolai's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes sharpened. Alara took a breath and continued. You saw me. In that grocery store. You saw the bruises and the fear, and you didn't look away. Most people look away. Most people are cowards. Or they just don't want to get involved. Same thing. She almost smiled. You're very black and white. It makes decisions easier. They ate in silence for a while. Then Nikolai said, I spoke with your supervisor. She's holding your position. Take as much time as you need. Alara's throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Why? He set down his wine glass and looked at her directly. Because you're good at your job, and you shouldn't have to choose between safety and employment. It was such a simple statement, delivered with such certainty, that Alara felt something inside her shift. This man who had blood on his hands and enemies in the shadows, and a reputation that made strangers cross the street, was sitting across from her acting like her well-being was the most important thing in the world. I don't know how to repay you for any of this, she said quietly. You don't repay kindness. You accept it. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works. Alara studied him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the stories she'd started to piece together from overheard phone calls and Mira's careful comments. Nikolai Veyer, 53 years old, built an empire from nothing after a childhood that had been violent and brutal, controlled half the organized crime in Boston, and had enough power that politicians took his calls and police looked the other way. And he was using all of that power to make sure she could eat dinner without being afraid. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Someone crueler." Nikolai's mouth curved slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "I can be cruel when the situation requires it, but cruelty for its own sake is wasteful." "Is that why you help people like me?" "I help people like you because no one helped my mother. And I decided a long time ago that I wouldn't let history repeat itself if I had the power to stop it." Alara's chest ached. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that matched the weight of his honesty, but all she could manage was, "I'm glad I collapsed in front of you instead of someone else." This time Nikolai did smile. It was brief and devastating. "So am I." 3 weeks passed. Alara started to feel human again. Her ribs stopped aching. The bruises on her throat faded to yellow and then disappeared entirely. She put on weight. She slept through the night without nightmares, and every evening she had dinner with Nikolai. They talked about books, music, the city, everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in the outskirts of Boston with a father who disappeared when he was 6 and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. She told him about her childhood in rural Maine, about loving stories more than people, about the way books had always felt safer than the real world. They never talked about Bram. They never talked about what Nikolai did for a living. And they never acknowledged the thing that was building between them with every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every moment when their eyes met and held for just a beat too long. On a Friday night in early December, Nikolai asked if she wanted to watch a movie. They sat on opposite ends of the long couch in the living room, a respectable distance between them, and watched Casablanca on the massive screen mounted above the fireplace. Mira had gone to bed an hour earlier. The penthouse was quiet except for Humphrey Bogart's voice and the soft crackle of the fire. Alara pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, watching the black and white figures on screen navigate love and loss and impossible choices. "This is my favorite movie," she said quietly. "I know." She turned to look at him. "How do you know that?" "You have 3 copies of it in your book collection, different editions. I assumed it was significant." Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. "You went through my books?" "I was curious." "About what?" Nikolai's gaze shifted from the screen to her face. "About you." The air between them changed, became charged, electric. Alara's pulse kicked up. "Nikolai, I should tell you something." His voice was quiet, careful. "And you should know that I've been trying not to tell you for weeks because I didn't want to complicate what you're going through." "Tell me what?" He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, and looked at her with those ice-blue eyes that saw too much. "I'm in love with you." Alara stopped breathing. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "I know you're still healing. I know I'm the last person you should trust with anything fragile. But I've been in love with you since the grocery store. Since the moment I caught you, and you looked up at me like I was something dangerous, and I need you to know that before this goes any further." Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm tired of pretending, and because you deserve to know the truth before you decide whether you want to stay." "Stay?" The word came out hoarse. "Here, with me." Nikolai straightened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. Vulnerable. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that if you want to leave, I'll help you find a place. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll stay out of your life. But if you want to stay—" He stopped, swallowed. "If you want to stay, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Alara stared at him. This man who had upended her entire world. This man who had given her safety and kindness and space to heal. This man who was looking at her like she was something precious and terrifying all at once. She uncurled from the couch and crossed the distance between them. Nikolai went very still. Alara reached out and touched his face, her palm against his jaw, feeling the rough texture of his stubble and the warmth of his skin. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. His eyes closed. When they opened again, they were burning. "Alara," she kissed him. It was tentative at first, careful, both of them testing the shape of this thing between them. Then Nikolai's hand came up to cup the back of her head, and the kiss deepened, turned hungry, became something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, Alara was breathless. "I think I've been in love with you too," she said against his mouth. "I just didn't know how to say it." Nikolai kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Then he pulled back just far enough to rest his forehead against hers. "I need you to understand what you're choosing," he said quietly. "I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you leave if you knew the details. I have enemies who would hurt you to hurt me. I can protect you from most threats, but I can't promise you'll ever be completely safe." Alara tightened her grip on his shoulders. "I don't need you to be good. I need you to be honest. And you've been more honest with me in 3 weeks than Bram was in 8 months. So if you're asking whether I can handle your world, the answer is I don't know. But I want to try." Nikolai searched her face for a long moment. Then he kissed her again, and this time it felt like a vow. Met. 4 months later, on a cold April evening, Nikolai took Alara to the public library where she worked. They walked through the main reading room after hours, past rows of silent books and empty study tables, and up a narrow staircase to a wing that had been under renovation for the past year. When Nikolai opened the door, Alara stopped breathing. The entire space had been transformed. New shelving, restored woodwork, updated lighting that made the room glow like something out of a dream. And on the wall near the entrance, a brass plaque that read, "The Alara Wren Rare Book Collection." "You did this," she whispered. "I funded it." Nikolai stood behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "The library did the work." Alara turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "Why?" "Because you love this place, and because I love you." She kissed him there, surrounded by books and possibility, and when she pulled back, Nikolai was holding a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a sapphire ring set in platinum, the stone the exact color of his eyes. "Marry me," he said. Not a question, a promise. Alara's hand shook as she reached for the ring. "Yes." Nikolai slid it onto her finger, and then he kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. They set the wedding date for 3 months later, and for 72 hours, everything was perfect. Then Alara's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She opened it. The photo showed her leaving Nikolai's building that morning, coffee in hand, completely unaware she was being watched. Superimposed over her image was a set of crosshairs. The text below it read, "He took something from me. Now I'm going to take something from him." The phone slipped from Alara's fingers and clattered onto the marble floor of the library wing. Nikolai had it in his hand before she could blink. His eyes scanned the screen, and every line of his body went rigid. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something cold and calculating that she'd only glimpsed in fragments over the past 4 months. When did this come in? His voice was flat, controlled. The tone he used when giving orders to men who didn't ask questions. "Just now," Alara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. While we were... She couldn't finish the sentence. 10 seconds ago, she'd been wearing an engagement ring and crying happy tears surrounded by books and the man she loved. Now she was staring at a photograph of herself marked for death. Nikolai was already moving. He pulled his own phone from his pocket and dialed with one hand while gripping her arm with the other, steering her toward the exit. "Marcus, I need a full security sweep on Alara's movements for the past 48 hours. Someone's been tracking her. I want cameras pulled, traffic analysis, and a list of every vehicle that's been within 2 blocks of the building." He paused, listening. "I don't care what time it is. Wake everyone. This is priority 1. Alara let him guide her down the stairs, through the silent library, and out to the street where his car was already waiting. The driver, a man named Victor, who Alara had learned was more bodyguard than chauffeur, opened the door without a word. She slid into the back seat. Nikolai followed, still on the phone. "Run the image through facial recognition. Check it against every database we have access to. I want to know what camera took this photo, when it was taken, and who the hell was holding it." He ended the call and turned to Alara. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm..." She stopped. What was she? Terrified? Numb? Both? "Look at me." She did. His eyes were ice. "I need you to think carefully. Have you noticed anyone following you? Anyone watching you at work, at the coffee shop, anywhere?" Alara's mind raced back through the past week. She'd been so happy, so caught up in wedding planning and the excitement of the engagement that she hadn't been paying attention to anything else. "I don't know," she whispered. "I wasn't looking." "That's not your fault. It's mine." Nikolai's jaw tightened. "I got careless. I let myself believe that because Bram was gone, the threat was over. This isn't about Bram. No, it's about someone else I pissed off. Someone who knows that the fastest way to hurt me is through you." He looked away, staring out the tinted window at the city sliding past. "I should have seen this coming." Ilara reached for his hand. He let her take it, but his fingers remained tense, coiled like he was preparing to fight something she couldn't see. "Who do you think sent it?" she asked. "I have a list." His voice was grim. "It's not a short one." The penthouse was already transformed by the time they arrived. Men Ilara had never seen before occupied every corner of the living room, speaking in low voices, staring at laptop screens, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. Mira stood near the kitchen, arms crossed, her face drawn tight with worry. Nikolai walked straight to the center of the room. Everyone stopped talking. "Status?" A man with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek stepped forward. "We pulled traffic cam footage from Commonwealth Avenue. Black SUV, tinted windows, no plates. It's been circling the building for 3 days. Different times, different angles. Whoever took the photo knew her routine." "Facial recognition on the driver?" "Nothing yet. Windows are too dark." "Two. Then find another angle. Pull security footage from every building on the block. Someone saw something." Nikolai's gaze swept the room. "I want a full detail on Ilara starting now. 2 men minimum, rotating shifts. She doesn't go anywhere alone. Not the lobby, not the hallway, nowhere." Ilara's stomach turned. "Nikolai." He looked at her, and something in his expression softened just slightly. "Not now." "Yes, now." She crossed the room to stand in front of him, ignoring the stares from the men around them. "You can't just lock me up and expect me to sit quietly while you handle this." "That's exactly what I expect." "Well, that's not what's going to happen." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Ilara, someone is targeting you because of me. This is my responsibility. Let me handle it. By turning me into a prisoner, by keeping you alive." The words hung between them, sharp and ugly. One of the men cleared his throat. "Boss, we should move this conversation. Out!" Nikolai didn't look away from Ilara. "Everyone out. Now." The room emptied in seconds. Even Mira disappeared down the hallway, leaving them alone in the vast space. Nikolai ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the silver-threaded strands. He looked tired suddenly, older. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. "You won't. You don't know that. You don't know what these people are capable of." "Then tell me." Ilara stepped closer. "Stop protecting me from the truth and tell me who we're dealing with." Nikolai was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, and drank half of it in one swallow. 6 months ago, I dismantled a trafficking operation running through the port of Boston. Cargo containers full of women and children being moved through the city like livestock. The man running it was named Silas Crown. Ilara's blood went cold. "Was?" "Is." I shut down his operation, turned his contacts over to federal investigators, and made sure he lost every dollar he'd invested in the venture. But I didn't kill him. I should have. Instead, I let him run, thinking he'd be smart enough to disappear. He didn't disappear. No. He went underground, rebuilt, and now he's decided that the best way to get revenge is to take something from me the way I took something from him. Ilara sank onto the arm of the couch. "You think he sent the photo?" "I know he did. That's his signature. Psychological warfare before the actual strike. He wants me to know it's coming, wants me to feel helpless." "Are you? Helpless?" Nikolai's laugh was bitter. "Against someone willing to hurt an innocent woman to make a point?" "Yes. Because every resource I use to protect you is a resource he can exploit. Every move I make to keep you safe gives him information about my priorities. So what do we do?" "We?" Nikolai set down his glass. "There is no we in this, Ilara. You stay here, under guard, until I track him down and end this." "And how long will that take?" "However long it takes." Ilara stood. "I can't live like that. I won't." You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. I can choose to trust you to keep me safe without locking me in a cage. I can choose to keep living my life instead of letting this person control me through fear. Your life? Nikolai's voice rose. Your life is the thing he's trying to take. Do you understand that? This isn't about control or fear or... He stopped himself, breathing hard. I'm sorry. I shouldn't yell. Yell if you need to. I'd rather have you angry than distant. He looked at her like she'd said something in a language he didn't understand. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with enough force to steal her breath. I can't do this without you, he said into her hair. But I can't lose you either, so you have to let me protect you the only way I know how. Alara pressed her face against his chest, breathing in cedar and whiskey and the scent that had become home over the past months. Okay, she whispered, but you have to promise me something. Anything. When this is over, when Silas Crown is dealt with and the threat is gone, we go back to planning our wedding. We don't let this steal our future. Nikolai pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were bright. I promise. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth. When they broke apart, the men had quietly filtered back into the room, pretending they hadn't been listening from the hallway. Nikolai's mask slid back into place. Cold, controlled, lethal. Find him, he said. And when you do, bring him to me alive. The next 72 hours were a study in controlled chaos. Alara stopped going to work, stopped going anywhere. 2 guards, one named Marcus, the other called Dmitri, stationed themselves outside her bedroom door and followed her whenever she moved through the penthouse. Mira tried to maintain normalcy, cooking elaborate meals and chatting about wedding flowers and dress fabrics, but the tension underneath every conversation was suffocating. Nikolai barely slept. Alara would wake at 3 in the morning to find his side of the bed empty, and when she ventured out to the living room, he'd be on the phone or staring at security footage, or having low, terse conversations with men who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. She tried to be patient, tried to understand that this was how he showed love, through protection, through action, through the systematic dismantling of threats. But on the 4th day, she broke. She found Nikolai in his office, sitting behind a massive desk covered in surveillance photos and handwritten notes. He looked up when she entered, and the exhaustion in his face made her heart ache. You should be resting, he said. So should you. I'll rest when this is over. Alara closed the door behind her and leaned against it. Have you found anything? Silas is good at hiding, but everyone makes mistakes. We're tracking financial movements, offshore accounts, property transfers. He'll surface eventually. And then what? Nikolai's expression went flat. Then I make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else ever again. You mean you'll kill him? Yes. The word was simple. Final. Alara crossed the room and sat in the chair across from his desk. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Always. How many people have you killed? Nikolai didn't flinch. 17, directly. More if you count orders I've given that resulted in deaths. The number should have horrified her. Instead, Alara felt a strange sense of relief. He wasn't lying, wasn't softening the edges. He was giving her the truth exactly the way she'd asked for it. Did they deserve it? By my definition, yes. By the law's definition, it's irrelevant. I'm not interested in legal justice. I'm interested in making sure people who prey on the helpless stop breathing. Alara studied his face. You think Silas deserves to die? I know he does. I've seen what he's done. The women he's trafficked, the lives he's destroyed. He's a cancer, and you don't negotiate with cancer. You cut it out. And if I asked you not to kill him? Nikolai's eyes sharpened. Why would you ask that? Because I want to know if you'd choose me over your principles. My principles exist to protect people like you. There's no conflict. That's not an answer. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. If you genuinely believed that sparing Silas Crown's life was the right thing to do, I'd listen. I'd consider your reasoning. But I wouldn't let him live if it meant you'd be in danger a month from now, a year from now, ever. So the answer is no. I wouldn't choose you over my principles, because keeping you safe is the principle. Alara absorbed this. You're not going to apologize for being who you are. No. I told you from the beginning what I was. I won't pretend to be something cleaner just because it makes you comfortable. Good. She stood and walked around the desk to stand beside his chair. Because I don't want you to be something you're not. I just wanted to hear you say it. Nikolai reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Are you having second thoughts? About marrying you? No. About the part where armed men follow me to the bathroom? Yes. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Give me 1 more week. If we haven't found Silas by then, we'll reassess the security protocol. Promise? Promise. Alara leaned down and kissed him. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, holding her there, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, the two of them, the warmth of his skin, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then his phone buzzed. Nikolai broke the kiss and checked the screen. Whatever he saw there made his entire body go rigid. What is it? Alara asked. He stood, already moving toward the door. Marcus just flagged a vehicle outside the building. Black SUV, no plates, same one from the traffic footage. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. Is Silas in it? We're about to find out. Nikolai was down the hallway before Alara could respond. She followed, her pulse hammering in her ears, and found the living room full of men again. One of them had a laptop open, showing a live feed from the security camera mounted above the building's entrance. The SUV was parked across the street, engine idling, windows dark. Do we have a plate yet? Nikolai asked. Negative. It's been scrubbed. Thermal imaging? 2 bodies inside, driver and passenger. Nikolai's jaw tightened. Send someone down. I want eyes on that vehicle. Already done. Victor's in position. On the screen, Alara watched a man, Victor, she assumed, emerge from the building's garage and cross the street with casual confidence. He approached the SUV from the passenger side, hands visible, body language non-threatening. The passenger window rolled down. Victor leaned in slightly, said something Alara couldn't hear, and then stepped back. The SUV pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. The room exhaled collectively. What just happened? Alara asked. Marcus answered without looking away from the screen. Victor told them to move along or we'd call the cops. They moved along. That's it? They just left? For now. Nikolai's voice was tight. But they'll be back. They're testing our response time, seeing how we react to pressure. So what do? We don't take the bait. Silas wants me to chase him, to leave you vulnerable while I'm hunting. We stay here, stay fortified, and let him make the next move. Alara hated the logic of it, even as she understood the strategy. How long do we wait? As long as it takes. But it didn't take long. That night, just after midnight, Alara's new phone buzzed with another message from the unknown number. She was in bed, curled against Nikolai's side, both of them pretending to sleep while tension coiled through the dark room. She grabbed the phone from the nightstand and opened the message before he could stop her. This time it wasn't a photo. It was a video. Alara pressed play and watched the footage of herself walking through the library 5 days ago. The camera followed her down a hallway, into the rare book room, capturing her movements with clinical precision. Then the video cut to black, and white text appeared on the screen. 3 days until the wedding. I'll be there. Will you? Alara's hand started shaking. Nikolai took the phone from her, watched the video twice, and then made a sound low in his throat that was more growl than word. He knows the date. How? Alara's voice cracked. We haven't sent invitations yet. We haven't even finalized the venue. He has someone inside. Nikolai was already out of bed, pulling on jeans and a shirt. Someone close enough to know our plans. That's not possible. The only people who know are Mira, your security team, and... She stopped. Nikolai's eyes went cold. And who? I told my supervisor at the library. She asked when I'd be taking time off for the wedding, and I mentioned the date. Who else did she tell? I don't know. Maybe no one. Maybe everyone. Alara pressed her hands against her face. I'm sorry. I didn't think... Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. Nikolai grabbed his phone and started typing. But we're moving up the timeline. We can't wait for Silas to make the first move. What are you going to do? He looked at her, and in the dim light from the city outside, his face was all hard edges and lethal intent. I'm going to give him what he wants. A target. Me. No. Alara scrambled out of bed. You can't use yourself as bait. That's exactly what he's expecting. Which is why it'll work. Silas is arrogant. He thinks I'm predictable. I'll prove him wrong. By getting yourself killed? By drawing him out into the open where my people can take him. Nikolai crossed to her and gripped her shoulders. I need you to trust me. I do trust you. I don't trust him. Then trust that I've survived worse than Silas Crown, and I'll survive this too. He kissed her forehead and left the room before she could argue. Alara stood alone in the dark, listening to the sound of men mobilizing in the living room, phones ringing, orders being given in low, urgent voices. She picked up her phone and stared at the video again. 3 days until the wedding, the words felt like a countdown to something terrible. The next morning, Nikolai announced they were moving the wedding to a private estate outside the city. It's more defensible, he explained over breakfast while Mira poured coffee with hands that shook slightly. Controlled access, limited entry points, and far enough from Boston that Silas will have to expose himself to get close. Alara pushed eggs around her plate. You're turning our wedding into a trap. I'm turning it into a fortress. There's a difference. Is there? Nikolai set down his fork. Do you want to postpone? We can wait until this is over. And when will that be? A month? A year? Alara met his eyes. I meant what I said. I'm not letting Silas Crown steal our future. If you say the estate is safe, then we get married there. Something in his expression softened. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing to trust you anyway. Mira made a sound that might have been approval or worry. I'll call the caterer and the florist. We'll need to move everything. Already done. Nikolai pulled out his phone and showed them a series of confirmations. Venue secured, vendors notified, security personnel briefed. The only thing that changes is the location. Alara stared at the screen. When did you arrange all this? 3 hours ago. You haven't slept. I'll sleep after the wedding. Nikolai, I'm fine. He stood and came around the table to kiss the top of her head. I need to meet with the security team. Stay inside today, please. It wasn't really a request. Alara nodded because arguing felt pointless. After he left, Mira sat down across from her and reached for her hand. He's terrified, the older woman said quietly. I know. I've worked for Nikolai for 15 years. I've seen him handle wars, betrayals, assassination attempts. I've never seen him like this. Like what? Afraid of losing something that matters more than his own life. Mira squeezed her fingers. You've changed him, dear, made him vulnerable. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time. Alara's throat tightened. I didn't mean to make things harder for him. Love always makes things harder. That's how you know it's real. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of men moving through the penthouse, preparing for a war neither of them could see but both of them could feel coming. Mira, Alara said finally, do you think we'll actually make it to the wedding? The older woman's face was grave. I think Nikolai would burn this city to the ground before he let anything stop it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. 2 days before the wedding, Alara woke to find Nikolai's side of the bed cold. She checked her phone. 4 a.m. No messages. She found him in the living room, standing by the windows, staring out at the pre-dawn darkness over Boston Harbor. He'd showered and dressed in all black, tactical pants, fitted shirt, boots that looked designed for running or fighting or both. Where are you going? She asked. He turned. We found him. Alara's heart stopped. Silas? One of his lieutenants. Picked him up an hour ago on the South Shore. He's being brought to a secure location for questioning. Questioning. She knew what that word meant in Nikolai's world. I need to be there when they break him. And you think he'll give up Silas's location? He'll give up everything he knows. People always do when the alternative is worse. Alara crossed the room to stand in front of him. How long will you be gone? A few hours, maybe less. Nikolai cupped her face in his hands. Marcus and Dmitri will stay with you. Mira's here. You'll be safe. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you walking into whatever trap Silas has waiting. It's not a trap. It's an opportunity. You don't know that. I know that doing nothing is more dangerous than taking calculated risks. And this is calculated. He kissed her, slow and thorough. I'll be back before lunch. We still need to finalize the seating chart. The normalcy of the statement was so jarring that Alara almost laughed. Yes, God forbid we forget the seating chart while you're out torturing information from people. That's my girl. Nikolai smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I love you. Remember that. Why does that sound like goodbye? It's not. It's a reminder. He left before she could respond. Alara stood by the windows and watched the city wake up, light spilling across buildings and streets and the harbor beyond, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Marcus appeared with coffee. He'll be fine. Boss knows what he's doing. Does he? Because it feels like we're all just improvising and hoping for the best. That's basically what life is. Marcus handed her the mug. You just notice it more when the stakes are this high. Alara sipped the coffee. It was too hot and too strong, but it gave her something to focus on besides the knot of anxiety in her chest. Hours crawled past. Mira tried to distract her with wedding details, flowers, music, the final fitting for her dress. But Alara couldn't concentrate. She kept checking her phone, waiting for a message from Nikolai that didn't come. By noon, she was pacing. By 2, she was ready to demand that Marcus drive her to wherever Nikolai had gone. At 2:30, the penthouse door opened. Nikolai walked in looking like he'd been through a war. Blood on his knuckles, a bruise forming along his jaw, his shirt torn at the shoulder. Alara ran to him. What happened? We got what we needed. His voice was hoarse. Silas is operating out of a warehouse in Chelsea. He's planning to move against the estate tomorrow night during the ceremony. How many people is he bringing? Enough to make it interesting. Nikolai stripped off his ruined shirt and headed for the bathroom. But not enough to get past our defenses. We'll be ready. Alara followed him. You're sure? I'm sure. He turned on the shower and started scrubbing blood from his hands. The lieutenant gave us everything. Entry point Silas is planning to exploit, the timeline for the attack, even the names of the men he's recruited. We're 3 steps ahead now. And the lieutenant, where is he? Nikolai's expression went cold. In a place where he can't warn Silas that we know. Dead? Not yet, but he will be. Alara should have been horrified. Instead, she felt a grim sense of satisfaction. These were the stakes. This was the world she'd chosen when she said yes to Nikolai's ring. She stepped into the bathroom and closed the door behind her. I need you to promise me something, she said. Nikolai looked at her through the shower steam. What? Tomorrow, when Silas comes, because he will come, even knowing it's a trap. I need you to end it, permanently. No more waiting, no more half measures. I want him gone. Something shifted in Nikolai's eyes. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. I was planning on it. Good. Alara crossed to the shower and kissed him through the spray, tasting water and copper, and the promise of violence to come. Then let's get married and finish this. The estate was 40 minutes outside Boston, surrounded by woods and high stone walls, and enough security to repel a small army. Alara arrived the morning of the wedding in an armored car with Mira, Marcus, and 4 other guards. The dress was already there, hanging in a room that overlooked gardens strung with white lights and rows of chairs arranged for a ceremony that might turn into a bloodbath. She tried not to think about it. The hairstylist arrived at noon, the makeup artist at 1. By 3, Alara was standing in front of a mirror wearing ivory silk and lace, her dark hair swept up and pinned with small white roses, looking like someone who belonged in a fairy tale instead of a crime boss's war zone. Mira stood behind her, eyes bright with tears. You're beautiful, dear. I'm terrified. You can be both. A knock on the door made them both turn. Marcus stepped inside, earpiece visible, weapon holstered at his hip. We have movement on the perimeter. Silas's people are early. Alara's stomach dropped. How early? 2 hours. They're setting up in the woods to the east. Does Nikolai know? He's handling it. Marcus's tone was carefully neutral. But he wants you in the safe room until the ceremony starts. No. Alara. No. She turned to face him fully. I'm not hiding while Nikolai is out there. If Silas comes early, we move up the timeline. We get married now before he has a chance to interfere. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Then he pressed a finger to his earpiece, listened, and nodded. Boss says okay. Ceremony starts in 15 minutes. Guests are being moved into position now. Alara's hands shook as she reached for her bouquet. White roses and eucalyptus, simple and elegant. Mira gripped her shoulders. Are you ready for this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They moved through the estate like soldiers heading into battle. Down hallways lined with guards, through rooms where men in suits checked weapons and radios, out onto a stone terrace where an aisle of white rose petals led to an arch wrapped in flowers. Nikolai stood beneath it, wearing a black suit and a look of absolute focus. When he saw Alara, everything else fell away. She walked toward him. No music, no fanfare, just the sound of her heels on stone and the wind through the trees, and took his hands. The officiant, a judge Nikolai had pulled from retirement and who looked like he'd presided over worse ceremonies, began speaking. Alara barely heard the words. She was watching Nikolai's eyes, the way they tracked movement behind her, the way his jaw tightened when Marcus spoke quietly into his radio. They're in position, Marcus murmured. 3 minutes out. Nikolai's grip on her hands tightened. The judge continued. Do you, Nikolai Vare, take this woman? I do. And do you, Alara Wren? I do. The judge blinked. I haven't finished the question. We're out of time, Nikolai said. Just marry us. A burst of static from Marcus's radio, then a voice. Contact, east perimeter, multiple hostiles. Gunfire erupted in the distance. The judge's hand shook as he produced rings. Nikolai slid a platinum band onto Alara's finger with rock-steady hands. She did the same for him, her entire body vibrating with adrenaline. By the power vested in me, the judge said quickly, I now pronounce you. An explosion rocked the east wall. Nikolai pulled Alara against him as debris rained down. Husband and wife, the judge finished. Nikolai kissed her hard, one hand cupping the back of her head, the other reaching for the gun Marcus pressed into his palm. When he pulled back, his eyes were burning. Go with Marcus. Now. Nikolai. Now, Alara, please. Marcus's hand closed around her arm, already pulling her toward the house. Alara looked back and saw Nikolai walking toward the smoke and the gunfire, toward Silas Crown, and whatever hell was waiting beyond the wall. And she realized with perfect clarity that she'd just married a man who might not survive the next 10 minutes. Marcus dragged her through the door. The last thing she saw was Nikolai disappearing into the smoke, gun raised, moving like death itself toward the threat that had come for their wedding day. The safe room was nothing like Alara had imagined. Not some panic room closet with canned food and a landline, but an entire suite buried in the basement of the estate, reinforced with steel and concrete thick enough to survive an airstrike. Marcus shoved her through the door, and she stumbled into a space that looked like a luxury bunker. Leather furniture, monitors showing security feeds from every corner of the property, and enough weapons mounted on the walls to arm a platoon. Mira was already inside, face pale, hands gripping the back of a chair. Lock it! Marcus barked at Dmitri, who slammed the door shut. The deadbolts engaged with heavy metallic thuds that sounded like coffin lids closing. Alara ran to the monitors, searching the feeds for Nikolai. Smoke obscured half the cameras. The east wall was gone, reduced to rubble and twisted metal. Men in tactical gear poured through the breach, firing at guards who returned shots from behind overturned tables and stone planters. Where is he? Her voice came out raw. Where's Nikolai? Marcus pressed his earpiece, listening to chatter Alara couldn't hear. His jaw tightened. He's engaging hostiles at the primary breach. Victor's team is flanking from the south. We've got this contained. That doesn't look contained. Alara pointed at a feed showing 3 of Nikolai's men going down under sustained fire. That looks like a massacre. It's a tactical retreat. They're drawing Silas's people into a kill zone. Another explosion rocked the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. One of the monitors went dark. Alara's hands clenched into fists, crushing the delicate bouquet she was still holding. White roses and eucalyptus scattered across the floor like debris from her shattered wedding. On the screens, she watched Nikolai move through the chaos with surgical precision. He fired twice, and 2 men dropped. Reloaded without breaking stride. Disappeared behind a column as bullets chewed through stone where he'd been standing a second before. He was magnificent and terrifying, and Alara had never been more afraid in her life. How many did Silas bring? She asked. Marcus hesitated. Intel said 12. We're counting at least 20. 20? Mira's voice cracked. That's not possible. The lieutenant said... The lieutenant lied. Dmitri was at another monitor, fingers flying over a keyboard. Or Silas fed him false information knowing we'd break him. Alara's blood went cold. Nikolai walked into a trap. We all did. Marcus was already on his radio, voice clipped and urgent. Boss, we've got revised hostile count. 20 plus. Repeat, 20 plus. You need to pull back. Static. Then Nikolai's voice, distorted but clear. Negative. We hold the line. Silas is here. I'm not letting him walk away. Boss, that's an order, Marcus. The radio went silent. Alara grabbed Marcus's arm. You have to get him out of there. I have orders to keep you safe. That means staying in this room. I don't care about your orders. He's outnumbered. He's going to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words that would make them real. Marcus's expression was granite. Nikolai knows what he's doing. He's survived worse odds than this. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've been with him for 8 years. I've watched him walk through hell and come out the other side. He'll do it again. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the man she'd just married, the man who'd promised to stand beside her forever, would actually survive long enough to keep that promise. But the monitors told a different story. Nikolai's forces were being pushed back, step by bloody step. Bodies littered the grounds. The beautiful ceremony space with its white roses and string lights had become a war zone. And somewhere in that chaos, Silas Crown was hunting her husband. 15 minutes into the firefight, the power went out. The monitors died. The lights cut to black. Emergency generators kicked in after 3 seconds of absolute darkness, bathing the safe room in harsh red light that made everything look like a crime scene. What happened? Alara's voice was too loud in the sudden quiet. Dmitri was already moving, checking systems with practiced efficiency. They hit the main power line. Backup is holding, but we've lost external cameras. So we're blind. Temporarily. Marcus was on the radio again, trying to raise Nikolai. Nothing but static answered him. Alara paced the length of the room, her wedding dress whispering against the floor like a ghost. She'd been married for less than 20 minutes, and already it felt like a lifetime ago. The kiss, the rings, the judges shaking hands, pronouncing them husband and wife while gunfire echoed in the distance. She reached for the platinum band on her finger, turning it absently, feeling the weight of it. Mira appeared beside her with a glass of water. Drink this, dear. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm already sick. Alara stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. I shouldn't have let him go out there. I should have made him stay. You couldn't have stopped him. When Nikolai decides to protect something, he doesn't calculate the cost. That's what I'm afraid of. A burst of static from Marcus's radio made them both turn. Repeat. We have visual on the primary target, East Garden, heading for the main house. Boss is in pursuit. Marcus cursed under his breath. Copy that. Keep me updated. The main house, Alara said slowly. That's right above us. Yes. So Silas is... Footsteps overhead. Heavy. Running. Then gunfire. Close enough that Alara could hear the individual shots, distinct and sharp, not muffled by distance. More footsteps. A crash. Something shattering. Alara looked at the ceiling, tracking the sounds. They're fighting directly above us. The safe room is secure, Marcus said, but his hand had drifted to his weapon. No one's getting through that door. What if Nikolai needs backup? He has backup. Victor's team is with him. You don't know that. You lost camera access. You're guessing. Marcus didn't deny it. Another crash overhead, louder this time, followed by silence so complete that Alara could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. She moved toward the door. Marcus blocked her path. Don't. I need to know if he's alive. If you open that door, you compromise the one safe position we have. Nikolai gave his life to make sure you were protected. Don't throw that away. He hasn't given his life. Don't talk about him like he's already dead. I'm not... The radio crackled to life. Marcus, Victor's voice. Strained. We've got a problem. Define problem. Boss is down. Took around to the shoulder. He's still mobile but bleeding heavy. We're pinned in the north corridor. Can't get to him without exposing our position. Alara's vision tunneled. Did he just say, how many hostiles? Marcus was all business, his voice flat and controlled. 4, maybe 5. They've got the high ground and superior firepower. We need immediate backup or extraction. Marcus looked at Dmitri. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Dmitri nodded and moved to the weapons rack, selecting a rifle with the efficiency of long practice. We're coming to you, Marcus said into the radio. Hold position. Wait, Alara grabbed his arm. You can't leave us here. Mira stays with you. Door stays locked. Anyone tries to get in, you use this. He pressed a handgun into her palm. The metal was cold and heavy. Safety's off. Point and shoot. Don't hesitate. I don't know how to... You do now. Aim for center mass. Keep pulling the trigger until they stop moving. Dmitri was already at the door, rifle ready. Marcus joined him, checking his own weapon with quick, practiced movements. Marcus, Alara said. Her voice was shaking. Bring him back. That's the plan. The door opened. They slipped through. The locks engaged behind them with that same heavy finality. Alara and Mira were alone in the red-lit bunker with a gun neither of them knew how to use properly and no way to see what was happening in the world above. Mira sank into a chair. He'll be fine. Nikolai's been shot before. He knows how to handle it. How many times? Enough that he should be dead several times over. But he's not. He's too stubborn to die. Alara wanted to believe that. Wanted to trust in Nikolai's legendary resilience, his ability to survive situations that would kill normal men. But she'd seen the monitors before they went dark. She'd counted the bodies. She knew the math. 20 armed men against Nikolai's security team. How many had he brought? 15? 20? Even if the numbers were equal, Silas had the advantage of surprise, of false intelligence, of walking into a wedding ceremony that was supposed to be a fortress and turning it into an ambush. Time crawled. Alara counted seconds, then minutes, trying to mark the passage of time without a clock. The gun in her hand felt like an accusation. She turned it over, studying the grip, the trigger, the small mechanisms that translated intention into violence. She'd never fired a gun before today. She'd never thought she'd need to. Overhead, the sounds of fighting had moved away, deeper into the house. Or maybe they'd stopped entirely. It was impossible to tell through the layers of steel and concrete. How long has it been? She asked. Mira checked her watch. 8 minutes. Felt like hours. Alara set the gun on the table and pressed her hands against her face. The wedding ring caught the red light, throwing tiny reflections across the wall. She'd married a man she might never see again. She'd said vows that might already be broken by a bullet in a hallway somewhere above her head. She'd chosen this life knowing it came with violence and danger, but knowing and experiencing were two entirely different things. A sound at the door made them both freeze. Not knocking, scraping, metal on metal, like someone was testing the locks. Alara grabbed the gun. Her hands were steadier than she'd expected. Mira, get behind the furniture. The older woman moved without question, crouching behind the heavy leather couch. The scraping continued, then stopped. Silence. Alara aimed the gun at the door, finger on the trigger, exactly the way Marcus had shown her. Center mass, keep pulling until they stop moving. The radio on the table crackled. Alara, Nikolai's voice, rough, pained. Open the door. Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees almost buckled. She lunged for the radio. Are you alone? No, Marcus and Dmitri are with me. Victor's covering our 6. We need to get inside before gunfire. Close. The radio went dead. Nikolai! Alara shouted into the static. Nikolai, answer me. Nothing. Mira was already at the door, fingers on the locks. We have to let them in. What if it's not them? What if Silas forced him to pit? Then we're dead either way. But I'm not leaving Nikolai bleeding in a hallway. She threw the locks. The door burst open. Nikolai stumbled through, supported by Marcus on one side and Dmitri on the other. Blood soaked his white dress shirt, spreading from his left shoulder, down his arm in a crimson stain that looked black under the emergency lights. His face was gray, jaw clenched against pain. Victor backed through after them, firing into the hallway. Contact right, contact right! Marcus slammed the door. Dmitri engaged the locks. Bullets struck the other side with sharp metallic pings. Alara dropped the gun and ran to Nikolai. He caught her with his good arm, pulling her against him hard enough to hurt. "You're alive," she breathed. "For now." His voice was rough. "How bad is the bleeding?" Marcus ripped open Nikolai's shirt, revealing a wound just below the collarbone. Blood pulsed with each heartbeat. "Through and through. Missed the artery, but you're losing blood fast. We need to pack it." Mira was already moving, pulling a first aid kit from a cabinet. She returned with gauze, medical tape, and a bottle of something clear that smelled like antiseptic. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts." Nikolai let Marcus lower him into a chair. "Just stop the bleeding." Mira worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. She poured antiseptic directly into the wound. Nikolai's entire body went rigid, but he didn't make a sound. She packed the entry and exit wounds with gauze, then wrapped his shoulder with enough pressure to make him hiss through his teeth. Alara knelt beside the chair, gripping his hand. "What happened out there?" "What?" Silas brought more people than we expected, and better trained. Military, maybe ex-military. They knew exactly where to hit us. He looked at Marcus. "Casualties." Marcus's expression was grim. 7 confirmed dead, 3 critical. The rest are holding, but we're outnumbered and running low on ammunition. "Where's Silas?" "Still alive, still inside the house. Victor's team lost visual when we pulled back." Nikolai closed his eyes. "So we're trapped in a bunker while he owns the ground above us." "Temporarily. Reinforcements are 15 minutes out." 15 minutes is long enough for him to burn this entire estate to the ground with us inside it. Nikolai opened his eyes and looked at Alara. "I'm sorry, this was supposed to be our wedding day." "It still is." Alara touched his face. "We're married. That's all that matters." "You're married to a man who's bleeding out in a basement while the person who wants you dead walks free upstairs." "Stop it. We're going to get out of this." "How?" "We have 7 functional guards, limited ammunition, and no exit strategy. Silas controls the high ground. He can wait us out or flush us out. Either way, we lose." Victor, still posted by the door, spoke without turning around. "Boss, there's a third option." "I'm listening." "We use the emergency tunnel. Get Alara out through the east exit while Silas is focused on this position. Reinforcements can extract her before he knows she's gone." Nikolai considered this. "The tunnel exits half a mile from here, middle of the woods. If Silas has people positioned outside the perimeter, then we fight through them, but it's better odds than staying here." "He's right." Marcus was checking his ammunition, counting rounds. "We're sitting ducks in this room. At least in the tunnel, we're mobile." Alara looked between them. "What about you? What about Nikolai?" "I stay here," Nikolai said. "Draw Silas's attention. Make him think you're still in the safe room." "No." "Alara." "No." She stood, her wedding dress smeared with his blood, and stared down at him with all the fury she'd been holding back since Marcus had dragged her away from the ceremony. "I didn't marry you so you could sacrifice yourself while I run away through a tunnel. We leave together or we stay together. Those are the only options." Nikolai's jaw tightened. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. You're the one who's lost too much blood." "Which is exactly why I can't make that run. I'd slow you down, get you killed. Then we stay and fight. Against 20 armed men? That's suicide. Then we die together." Alara's voice was steel. "I mean it, Nikolai. I'm not leaving without you." He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. Maybe marrying a mafia boss had broken something fundamental in her survival instincts. But she meant every word. Mira cleared her throat. "There might be a fourth option." Everyone turned to look at her. The older woman was holding a phone. Not a smartphone. An old flip phone with physical buttons and a cracked screen that looked like it had survived a decade of abuse. "I called in a favor," she said quietly. "While you were all fighting, someone who owes Nikolai more than money can repay." Nikolai's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "James Kovich." The name meant nothing to Alara, but Nikolai's entire body went rigid. "You didn't." "I did. He's 10 minutes out with a tactical team. 20 men, fully equipped. He said to tell you the debt is paid in full." Marcus whistled low. "Kovich, I thought he retired after the incident in Providence." "He did." Nikolai was staring at Mira like she'd conjured a ghost. "Which is why I never called it in. That favor was supposed to be for something impossible. This qualifies. Mira's voice was gentle. Your wife is in a basement bunker on her wedding day while people try to kill her. If that's not impossible, I don't know what is. Nikolai looked at Alara. Something in his expression cracked. You really won't leave without me. Not a chance. He reached for her hand with his good arm and pulled her down until their foreheads touched. You're going to make my life very difficult. I married you for better or worse. This is worse. It's going to get much worse before it gets better. I can handle it. He kissed her, tasting like copper and gunpowder, and the salt of pain he wouldn't admit to feeling. When he pulled back, his eyes were clear, focused. All right, we wait for Kovich, but the second he secures the house, you're getting out of here. No arguments. We're both getting out. I have to finish this with Silas. You know that. Alara did know. She hated it, but she knew. Victor's voice cut through the moment. Movement in the hallway. They're trying the door again. Marcus joined him, weapon ready. How many? Can't tell. At least 2. The door shuddered under impact. Someone was trying to force it. Dmitri braced his shoulder against the steel. This door's rated for explosives. They'd need a tank to get through. As if on cue, an explosion rocked the hallway outside. The lights flickered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The door held. Barely. Marcus was on the radio. Kovich, this is Marcus Chen. What's your ETA? A new voice crackled through the speaker. Deep. Controlled. 7 minutes. Can you hold? We're about to find out. Another explosion. Closer. The steel door buckled inward at the center, creating a gap the width of a fist. Alara could see the hallway beyond. Smoke. Movement. The muzzle flash of a rifle. Victor returned fire through the gap. Someone screamed. They're breaching, Dmitri said. His voice was calm, factual. We need to fall back. There's nowhere to fall back to. Nikolai was on his feet now, swaying slightly, blood seeping through the bandages on his shoulder. He picked up a gun from the table with his right hand. We hold this position until Kovich arrives. Boss, you can barely stand. Then I'll fight sitting down. Give me a chair with a good angle on that door. No one moved to stop him. Alara realized with cold clarity that they were all preparing to die. Marcus positioned himself to the left of the door, Dmitri to the right. Victor in the center, rifle aimed at the growing gap. Mira stood behind the furniture with Alara, holding a handgun that looked wrong in her elderly hands. They waited. The third explosion tore the door off its hinges. It crashed inward, revealing 4 men in tactical gear silhouetted against the smoke-filled hallway. Victor fired first, dropped one. Marcus and Dmitri opened up simultaneously. 2 more went down. The 4th got a shot off before Nikolai's bullet took him in the throat. Silence fell. 4 bodies in the doorway, smoke curling through the entrance, the metallic smell of blood mixing with cordite. Reload, Nikolai ordered. They did. Footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, running toward them. Alara raised her gun, finger on the trigger, and realized she'd crossed some invisible line. She was ready to kill. Ready to defend this room, this man, this impossible life she'd chosen. A voice called out from the smoke. Hold your fire! Not Silas's voice. Deeper, older, authority in every syllable. A man stepped through the doorway. Late 50s, gray-haired, wearing body armor over civilian clothes. He held his weapon low, non-threatening, but everything about his posture screamed military precision. Kovich. Nikolai lowered his gun. You're early. I was in the neighborhood. James Kovich surveyed the room, taking in the bodies, the blood, the woman in a wedding dress holding a gun. Mira said you needed help. Looks like she undersold it. Silas Crown, somewhere in this house. Maybe 10 men left with him. Not anymore. Kovich's smile was grim. We cleared the main floor on our way in. Found Silas in your study, trying to crack your safe. He's secured. Alara's knees went weak. He's alive? For now. Thought Nikolai might want to handle that personally. Nikolai's expression went cold. Where is he? North Wing. My men are holding him there. Then let's go. Nikolai started toward the door. Marcus caught his good arm. Boss, you need a hospital. I need to look Silas in the eye. Hospital can wait. He walked out of the safe room without looking back. Alara followed. She'd told him she wouldn't leave him, and she meant it, even if it meant watching him do terrible things, even if it meant seeing exactly how dark his world could get. They moved through the estate like a funeral procession. Kovic's team had secured every room, cleared every threat. Bodies littered the hallways, some in tactical gear, some in the uniforms of Nikolai's security. The wedding venue was destroyed. Chairs overturned, flowers trampled, blood on the white runner where Alara was supposed to have walked toward her future. They found Silas in the north wing, zip-tied to a chair, surrounded by 4 armed men. He looked nothing like Alara had imagined. Not some movie villain with scars and dead eyes. Just a man in his 40s, average height, thinning hair, wearing expensive clothes that were now torn and dirty. He could have been anyone. A banker, a lawyer, someone's uncle. Until you looked at his eyes. They were empty, flat. The eyes of something that had stopped being human a long time ago. Silas looked up when Nikolai entered. His mouth curved into something approximating a smile. "Congratulations on your wedding," he said. "Hell of a ceremony." Nikolai's face was stone. "Give me the room." Kovic's men left without question. Marcus hesitated. "All of you," Nikolai said. "This is between me and him." "Nikolai," Alara started. "You too." "No." He turned to look at her. "Alara, you don't need to see this. I need to see all of you, the parts you show me and the parts you hide. You said you wouldn't lie to me about who you are, so don't hide this." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He nodded once. Everyone else filed out. The door closed. 3 people in the room. Nikolai, Alara, Silas. Nikolai walked to where Silas sat bound to the chair. He moved slowly, favoring his injured shoulder, but there was nothing weak about his presence. He radiated controlled violence. "You came to my wedding," Nikolai said quietly. "Brought an army. Killed my people. Tried to take my wife. Tried and failed." Silas's voice was conversational, but it was worth the attempt. "You took everything from me, Vare. I wanted you to feel what that was like. I shut down a trafficking operation. If that's everything to you, you're even more diseased than I thought. You destroyed my livelihood, my reputation, my future. You sold human beings like livestock. You deserve worse than what I gave you." Silas shrugged as much as the zip ties allowed. "Everyone's the hero of their own story. In mine, you're the villain who crushed a legitimate business enterprise. There's nothing legitimate about what you did." Says the crime boss with blood on his hands. Silas's eyes shifted to Alara. "Tell me, Mrs. Vare, do you know how many people your husband has killed? Do you know the things he's done to build his empire?" Alara met his gaze without flinching. "I know enough. Do you? Has he told you about the families he's destroyed? The businesses he's burned? The men who crossed him and disappeared?" "The men who deserved it," Nikolai said flatly. "Every single one." "And who decides what people deserve? You?" Silas laughed. "You're not a judge, you're a thug with delusions of morality." Nikolai's hand moved so fast Alara almost missed it. He grabbed Silas by the throat and squeezed. Silas's laughter choked off. "Here's what you deserve," Nikolai said. His voice was soft, deadly. "You deserve to know that you failed, that every person you brought to kill us is dead, that your organization is finished, that federal agents are raiding your properties as we speak, and that you'll spend the rest of your life in a prison cell thinking about the wedding you tried to destroy." He released Silas's throat. The man gasped for air, eyes watering. "You're giving me to the feds?" he wheezed. "That's not your style." "My style is whatever protects my wife, and a publicized arrest keeps you from becoming a martyr. Your people can't rally behind a man rotting in federal custody. So you're letting me live. For now." Silas's smile returned. "You're getting soft, Vare. Time was, you'd have put a bullet in me and dumped my body in the harbor. Time was, I didn't have someone I loved more than revenge." Nikolai turned and walked toward Alara. He took her hand. "We're done here." They were halfway to the door when Silas spoke again. "She won't last, you know. Women like her, they think they can handle this life. But they can't. Eventually she'll realize what you are and she'll leave. They always do." Alara stopped. She looked back at the man zip-tied to the chair, the man who tried to murder her on her wedding day, The man who thought he understood anything about her or Nikolai or what they'd built together. She walked back to him. Nikolai didn't stop her. Alara crouched in front of Silas, bringing them eye to eye. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I know exactly what he is. I knew when he caught me in a grocery store. I knew when he answered my phone and threatened my abuser. I knew when he told me he'd killed 17 people. And I married him anyway. Not despite the darkness, but because he uses it to protect people who can't protect themselves." She stood. "You traffic in human suffering. He stops people like you. There's no comparison. And if you think I'm going to break because this life is hard, you don't know anything about women who've survived men like my ex-boyfriend. We're stronger than you think, and we don't scare easily." Silas stared at her. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered in his empty eyes. Alara turned and walked back to Nikolai. He was looking at her like he'd never seen her before, like she'd just revealed something he hadn't known existed. "Let's go," she said. "You need a hospital, and I need to change out of this dress." They walked out together. Behind them, Silas sat alone in the empty room, waiting for the federal agents who would arrive within the hour to take him away. The hospital was a private facility 40 minutes from the estate, the kind of place that didn't ask questions when crime bosses showed up with gunshot wounds at midnight. Nikolai was in surgery for 2 hours. The bullet had damaged muscle tissue and nicked bone, but the surgeon was confident about full recovery. 6 weeks in a sling. Physical therapy, no permanent damage. Alara sat in the waiting room still wearing her blood-stained wedding dress, ignoring the stares from nurses and the one other patient brave enough to seek medical care at this hour. Mira sat beside her, silent and steady. Marcus paced. Victor stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating cleanup at the estate. When the surgeon finally emerged, Alara was on her feet before he finished pushing through the doors. "He's stable," the doctor said. "The surgery went well. He's in recovery now. You can see him in about 20 minutes. Relief hit her so hard she had to sit back down. Mira squeezed her hand. "Told you he was too stubborn to die. I hate that you were right. Get used to it. I'm right about most things." 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When they finally led Alara into the recovery room, Nikolai was awake, propped up against pillows, his left arm immobilized in a sling. He looked pale and exhausted and alive. She crossed to the bed and took his hand. "Hey," he said. His voice was rough from the anesthesia. "Hey, yourself." "Did I miss the reception?" Alara laughed. It came out half sob. "Yes, but I think we can reschedule. I'm sorry I ruined our wedding." "You didn't ruin it. Silas tried to ruin it. You saved it." "I got shot. And you're alive. That's all I care about." Nikolai studied her face. "What you said to Silas, about knowing what I am and marrying me anyway, did you mean it?" "Every word. I saw you pick up that gun, saw you ready to fight. You're not the same person I caught in the grocery store." "No, I'm not." Alara sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle his shoulder. "I'm the person who married a man with ice in his veins and fire in his heart. I'm the person who chose this life knowing exactly what it cost, and I'd choose it again." Nikolai's good hand came up to cup her face. "You terrify me." "Good. We're even." He kissed her gently, mindful of the IV lines and monitors and the fact that they were both running on fumes and adrenaline. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. "Alara, I need to tell you something about Silas, about why I gave him to the feds instead of killing him." "You don't have to explain." "I do. Because it's the first time I've ever chosen mercy over revenge, and I need you to understand why." She waited. "I looked at you," he said quietly. "Standing there in your wedding dress, covered in my blood, and I realized that killing Silas wouldn't make you safer. It would just make me the same as him, someone who takes lives without considering the cost. And I want to be better than that. For you. For us." Alara's throat tightened. "You're already better than that. You've always been." "I haven't, but I want to be. Then we'll figure it out together. The better version of you. The version that survives." Nikolai smiled. It was tired and real, and the most beautiful thing Alara had seen all day. "We got married," he said. "We did. In the middle of a war zone. Technically, the war zone started after the ceremony. We were legally married before the first explosion. That's a very lawyerly distinction. I'm dating my documentation to prove we said our vows before someone tried to kill us. I want the record to reflect that we chose each other first. You're brilliant. I married you. The jury's still out on my judgment. He laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his shoulder. Don't make me laugh. It hurts. Sorry. No, you're not. You're right. I'm not. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the beep of monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital operating through the night. Finally, Nikolai said, When I get out of here, we're doing this again. The wedding, properly. No threats. No guns. Just us and the people we love and a ceremony that doesn't end in a firefight. I'd like that. And a honeymoon, somewhere far away where no one knows who I am. That sounds impossible. I've done impossible things before. I'll do this too. Alara leaned down and kissed his forehead. I'm holding you to that promise. Good. Hold me to all of them. The door opened. Marcus stuck his head in. Boss, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. Nikolai's expression shifted instantly, back to business. What kind of situation? Federal agents are at the estate. They've taken Silas into custody, but they're asking questions. About the bodies. About the property damage. About you. Tell them I'm in the hospital with a gunshot wound sustained while defending my home from armed intruders. Everything else goes through my lawyer. Already done, but there's something else. What? Marcus hesitated. They found something in Silas's phone, communications with someone inside your organization, someone who fed him intel about the wedding, about the security layout, about Alara's routines. The room went cold. Nikolai sat up despite the pain, despite the sling, despite Alara's hand on his chest trying to keep him down. Who? They won't say, but they want to talk to you, soon as you're able. I'm able now. Nikolai, Alara started. Someone betrayed us. His voice was ice. Someone I trusted gave Silas the information he needed to nearly kill you. I need to know who. Marcus nodded grimly. I'll tell them you'll meet tomorrow, after you've had time to recover. Tonight. Boss, you just got out of surgery. And my wife almost died because someone in my organization sold us out. I'm not waiting until tomorrow to find out who. Alara wanted to argue, wanted to force him to rest, to heal, to let this wait. But she saw the look in his eyes and knew there was no point. Whoever had betrayed them had crossed the line that Nikolai would never forgive. And she was about to see exactly what he did to people who hurt the things he loved. Nikolai discharged himself from the hospital against medical advice at 3 a.m. The surgeon threatened to call security. Marcus threatened the surgeon. In the end, Nikolai walked out with a sling, a bottle of painkillers he wouldn't take, and Alara's hand gripped tight in his. The federal agents were waiting at a secure location downtown. Not a police station, but a nondescript office building that probably housed a dozen alphabet agencies. Marcus drove. Victor rode shotgun. Dmitri followed in a second car with 2 more guards. Alara sat in the back beside Nikolai, watching the city slide past in the pre-dawn darkness. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. The painkillers sat unopened in his pocket. He'd refused them 3 times. You should rest, she said quietly. I'll rest when I know who sold us out. What if it's someone close to you? Then they die. He said it without inflection, like he was discussing the weather. Alara believed him absolutely. The building was unmarked, gray concrete, and dark windows. They were escorted through a side entrance by a man in a suit who looked like he'd been grown in a government lab. Average height, average build, utterly forgettable, except for eyes that cataloged everything. The conference room was on the 4th floor. White walls, fluorescent lights, a table that had seen better decades. 2 federal agents sat on one side. A woman in her 40s with severe features and iron gray hair pulled into a bun. A man younger, maybe early 30s, with the kind of face that always looked concerned. They stood when Nikolai entered. Mr. Veyer, the woman said, I'm Agent Catherine Reeves, FBI. This is Agent Michael Torres. Thank you for coming. Nikolai took the seat across from them without shaking hands. Alara sat beside him. Marcus stood behind them, arms crossed. You said you found communications between Silas Crown and someone in my organization. Nikolai's voice was flat. I want names. Agent Reeves opened a folder and slid a printed transcript across the table. We recovered these messages from an encrypted phone found in Mr. Crown's possession. As you can see, the intelligence is specific. Wedding date, venue location, security rotations, even details about your fiancé's daily movements. Alara leaned forward to read the transcript. Her stomach turned. Unknown. Contact. Wedding confirmed for Saturday, April 19th. Estate location, 47 Birchwood Lane, Hamilton. Primary security detail, 15 personnel, rotating 8-hour shifts. Silas Crown. What about the girl? Unknown. Contact. Daily routine unchanged. Coffee shop on Newberry at 8:15 a.m. weekdays. Library Tuesdays and Thursdays until 6 p.m. Grocery shopping Saturdays, usually alone except for one guard trailing at distance. Silas Crown. And Veer's weakness? Unknown. Contact? Her. Completely. He'd burn his empire before letting her get hurt. The words blurred. Alara forced herself to keep reading. Who sent these messages? Nikolai's voice was very quiet. The number is registered to a burner phone, Agent Torres said. But we traced the purchase to a store in Cambridge. Security footage shows the buyer. He slid a photograph across the table. Alara's breath stopped. In the grainy image, a woman stood at a checkout counter, handing cash to a clerk. Dark hair pulled back. Familiar posture. A face Alara had seen hundreds of times over the past 4 months. Mira. No. The word came out before Alara could stop it. That's not possible. Agent Reeves watched her with professional detachment. You recognize the individual? That's... Alara looked at Nikolai. His face had gone completely blank, empty. Nikolai, that's Mira, but she would never... Where is she now? Nikolai asked Marcus, without taking his eyes off the photograph. Marcus's voice was tight. Still at the hospital, waiting in the lobby. She said she wanted to be there when you were discharged. Call Victor. Tell him to secure her, quietly. No one else knows about this until I say otherwise. Boss, do it. Marcus stepped into the hallway, phone already to his ear. Nikolai picked up the photograph, studying it with the focus of someone examining evidence for flaws. How certain are you that this is the person who contacted Silas? 95%, Agent Reeves said. The timeline matches. She purchased the phone 3 weeks before the first message was sent. The metadata on the text places the sender in locations consistent with your penthouse. Metadata can be spoofed. It can, but we also recovered financial records. Payments from offshore accounts controlled by Silas Crown to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. The account was opened by someone using a passport in the name Mira Volkov. Alara felt the room tilt. Volkov is her maiden name. She told me her husband died 20 years ago. She took back her family name. Her husband didn't die, Agent Torres said gently. He's serving a life sentence in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. Convicted of trafficking narcotics across state lines. The case agent was... He checked his notes. Special agent in charge, Nikolai Veer, 15 years ago. The silence in the room was absolute. Nikolai set down the photograph with exaggerated care. I put her husband in prison. You did. And 6 months later, she applied for a position as your housekeeper. Came with excellent references. Background check cleared. You hired her. She's worked for me for 15 years. Nikolai's voice was hollow. I trusted her with everything. My home, my security, my... He looked at Alara. I trusted her with you. Alara reached for his hand. It was cold. Agent Reeves closed the folder. Mr. Veer, we need you to understand that this is an ongoing federal investigation. Silas Crown is facing charges for trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and a dozen other felonies. If Mira Volkov provided material support to his operation, she's looking at 20 years minimum. If, Nikolai's eyes snapped to hers, you just showed me evidence that she sold us out. We have evidence of communication and financial transactions. What we don't have is testimony. Silas isn't talking, and without someone willing to cooperate, our case is circumstantial. You want me to get her to confess. We want you to convince her that cooperation is in her best interest. If she testifies against Silas, provides details about his organization, we can offer a reduced sentence, maybe 10 years instead of 20. Nikolai stood. The movement was too fast, pulled at his injured shoulder. He didn't flinch. You want me to sit down with the woman who betrayed me and negotiate a deal. We want justice, Mr. Vare, however we can get it. Justice. Nikolai's laugh was bitter. You don't know what that word means. Agent Reeves stood as well, meeting his eyes without fear. I know it means following the law instead of executing people in basements, which is why we're having this conversation instead of finding Mira Volkov's body in the harbor tomorrow. The threat was polite, professional, and absolutely serious. Nikolai stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out. Alara followed him into the hallway. Marcus was waiting, phone still pressed to his ear. Victor has her, he said quietly. She's asking what's going on. Wants to know if you're all right. Where is she? Private room on the second floor, under guard. Take me to her. They drove back to the hospital in silence. Alara watched Nikolai's profile, trying to read emotion in the rigid line of his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on his knee. He looked like carved ice. No warmth, no give. Nikolai, she said finally, what are you going to do? I'm going to ask her if it's true. And if it is? He didn't answer. The hospital room was small, windowless, probably used for storage before Victor had commandeered it. Mira sat in a plastic chair, hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than Alara had ever seen her. Two of Victor's men stood by the door, weapons visible. Mira looked up when they entered. Her face brightened. Nikolai, thank God. They wouldn't tell me what was happening. Are you all right? Did the surgery? Shut up. The words were quiet. Final. Mira's smile faltered. I don't understand. Nikolai pulled the photograph from his pocket and dropped it on the table beside her. The FBI recovered communications between Silas Crown and someone inside my organization, someone who gave him detailed intelligence about the wedding, about Alara's routines, about how to hurt me most effectively. Mira's eyes dropped to the photograph. Her face went gray. They traced the burner phone to you, Nikolai continued. His voice never rose, never wavered. They found financial records linking you to offshore payments from Silas, and they told me something I should have discovered 15 years ago when I hired you. Nikolai, your husband is Dmitry Volkov, convicted of narcotics trafficking, sentenced to life in federal prison, by me. Mira's hands started shaking. You came to work for me 6 months after I put him away. Excellent references, clean background. I never questioned it. I trusted you. His voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. I let you into my home. I let you meet Alara. I let you help plan our wedding while you were feeding information to a man who wanted to kill her. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Nikolai crouched in front of her chair, bringing them eye to eye. Tell me why you betrayed 15 years of trust. Tell me why you helped Silas Crown try to murder my wife on our wedding day. Tell me something that makes this make sense. Mira's eyes filled with tears. He has my daughter. The room went silent. What? Alara's voice was barely a whisper. Mira looked at her, and the tears spilled over. Silas has my daughter, my Katya. She's 23. She was working at a nonprofit in Providence, helping immigrant families. 6 weeks ago, she disappeared. No trace, no ransom. I filed a police report. Nothing. Then Silas called me. She was shaking now, the words tumbling out in a rush. He said he had her. Said she was alive and unharmed, but if I didn't cooperate, that would change. He told me to provide information, wedding details, security rotations, Alara's schedule. He said if I did what he asked, he'd release Katya after it was over. If I refused or told anyone, he'd send me pieces of her. Nikolai's expression didn't change. You could have come to me and say what? That my daughter was taken by your enemy? You would have gone to war and Katya would have died. Or you would have used her as leverage and she still would have died. There was no scenario where telling you saved her. So you chose her over us. I chose my child over everything. You would have done the same. I would have found another way. There was no other way. Mira's voice broke. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to betray you? I love you like a son, Nikolai. I watched you build this life from nothing. I was there when you brought Alara home, when you fell in love, when you proposed, and I sabotaged all of it because the alternative was watching my daughter die. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Alara felt her own tears burning. She understood the choice Mira had made, understood the impossible calculus of loving someone enough to betray everything else. But Nikolai's face remained stone. "Where is Katya now?" he asked. "I don't know. Silas said he'd release her after the wedding, after you were—" She stopped. "After I was what? Dead?" Mira nodded miserably. Nikolai stood. "Victor, call Agent Reeves. Tell her we need a team ready to move on Silas's properties. If he's holding someone, we're going to find them." "Nikolai, please." Mira reached for him. He stepped back. "You're going to cooperate with the FBI. You're going to tell them everything you know about Silas's operation. And you're going to pray that we find your daughter alive, because if we don't, there's nothing that will save you from what I'll do." "I understand." "Do you? Do you understand that 7 of my people died yesterday because of the information you provided? That Alara could have died? That our wedding turned into a massacre because you made a choice?" "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead." Nikolai turned to Victor. "Get her out of here. Hand her over to the feds. I don't want to see her again." "Wait." Alara's voice cut through the tension. "Nikolai, wait." He looked at her. His eyes were empty. "We need to find Katya," Alara said. "If she's still alive, we need to find her before—" "Before what? Before Silas kills her because his plan failed? She's probably already dead." "You don't know that. I know that Silas Crown doesn't leave loose ends, and Katya was always a loose end." He looked at Mira. "You traded our lives for someone who's already gone. I hope it was worth it." He walked out. Alara hesitated, torn between following him and staying with the woman who'd become almost a mother to her over the past months. Mira looked up, face streaked with tears. "Go with him. Please. Don't let him do something he'll regret." Alara nodded and ran after Nikolai. She caught him in the hallway, grabbed his good arm, and pulled him around to face her. "You can't give up on Katya." "She's not my responsibility." "Yes, she is, because Mira is your responsibility. She's been part of your family for 15 years. She stopped being family when she betrayed us. She's a mother trying to save her daughter. You would have done the same thing. I would have found another way." "There wasn't another way." Alara's voice rose. "Silas had all the leverage. He knew exactly how to manipulate her, just like he knew how to manipulate you through me. We're all just people trying to protect the things we love." Nikolai's jaw worked. "She got my people killed." "Silas got your people killed. Mira was a tool, a desperate woman with no good options." "That doesn't excuse what she did." "No, but it explains it. And if we find Katya alive, maybe it saves them both." Nikolai closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had shifted. The ice had cracked just slightly. "If we do this, if we go looking for her, it's on my terms. We don't negotiate with Silas. We don't trade anything for her release. We find her, and we take her, and if anyone gets in the way, they go down." "Agreed. And Mira still faces consequences. I can't let this go unpunished. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to try to save an innocent woman." Nikolai stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "Get me everything we have on Silas's properties. Warehouses, apartments, storage units, anything that could hold a hostage. Then call Kovich. Tell him I need his team for one more job." He ended the call and looked at Alara. "If we don't find her in the next 12 hours, I'm done. Mira goes to prison and we move on with our lives. 12 hours is enough. It has to be." They worked from Nikolai's penthouse, turning the living room into a command center. Kovich arrived with his tactical team. Marcus pulled up property records. Victor coordinated with sources on the street, shaking down anyone who might know where Silas kept his more sensitive assets. Alara sat at the dining table with a laptop, searching through social media accounts and public records for any mention of Katya Volkov. The young woman's life spilled across the screen in fragments. Instagram posts from volunteer events, Facebook check-ins at coffee shops, a LinkedIn profile showing work at a refugee assistance nonprofit in Providence. The last post was dated 6 weeks ago. A photo of Katya smiling outside a community center, caption reading, "These families deserve better. We all do." After that, nothing. Alara clicked through to Katya's friends list, looking for any recent activity, any clue about what might have happened. Most of the accounts were quiet. But one, a girl named Sarah Chen, who appeared in several photos with Katya, had posted something 3 days ago. Still praying for my friend. Please come home safe. Alara clicked on Sarah's profile and found her phone number listed publicly. She dialed. The girl answered on the third ring. Hello. Sarah Chen? My name is Alara Vare. I'm trying to find information about Katya Volkov. Who are you, police? No, Alara hesitated. I'm connected to someone who wants to help find her. Did she tell you anything before she disappeared? Anything about being followed or threatened? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, she called me the night before she vanished, said she'd seen someone outside her apartment, a man in a dark car. She thought she was being paranoid, but she asked me to check in on her the next day. Did you? I went to her apartment around noon. The door was open. Her phone was on the counter. Her purse was gone. It looked like she'd left in a hurry. Sarah's voice cracked. I called the police. They said she was probably with a boyfriend or took a spontaneous trip. They didn't take it seriously. Did she have a boyfriend? No. Katya was focused on work. She didn't have time for dating. Alara's pulse quickened. The man in the car, did she describe him? Average height, she said, dark jacket. She couldn't see his face. Did she take a photo? Video? I don't know. The police said they'd check her cloud backups, but I never heard anything. Sarah, I need you to send me any messages Katya sent you in the days before she disappeared. Screenshots, texts, anything. Why? Who are you, really? I'm someone who can actually help, please. Sarah hesitated. Then, okay, give me your number. Alara recited it. 2 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a series of screenshots. Most were mundane. Plans for coffee, complaints about work. But one message, sent the afternoon before Katya disappeared, made Alara's blood run cold. There's that car again. Third time today. I'm taking a photo of the plate. Attached was a blurry image of a dark sedan, license plate partially visible. Alara zoomed in, enhancing the image as much as the phone would allow. The plate read 7RTK-449. She ran across the room to where Marcus was working. I need you to run this plate. Marcus took the phone, squinted at the image, and typed the number into his system. 30 seconds later, results populated the screen. Registered to a rental company in Providence. Rented 6 weeks ago to a... He stopped. To who? Corporate account. Delaware LLC. Dummy Corporation. But the billing address traces back to a warehouse in South Boston registered under one of Silas's shell companies. Nikolai appeared behind them. What warehouse? Marcus pulled up the address. Industrial district, near the port. Registered as a storage facility, but no recent activity on record. That's where she is. Nikolai was already moving, grabbing his jacket despite the sling. Kovich, gear up your team. We're moving now. Boss, your shoulder, Marcus started, is fine. Let's go. Alara grabbed her own jacket. Nikolai turned to her. No. Yes. Alara, this is a tactical operation. You can't. You think I'm staying here while you run into another potential ambush? Not happening. She met his eyes. You promised we do this together. That means all of it. Nikolai looked like he wanted to argue. Then he glanced at Kovich, who shrugged. Your wife's got a point, Kovich said, and we could use someone with fresh eyes. Sometimes civilians see things we miss. Nikolai's jaw tightened, but he nodded. You stay behind me. You don't engage. If shooting starts, you hit the ground. Understood? Understood. They loaded into 3 vehicles, Kovich's team in the lead, heavily armed and stone-faced. Nikolai, Alara, Marcus, and Victor in the second. 2 more guards in the rear. The drive to South Boston took 20 minutes through sparse pre-dawn traffic. The warehouse district was a maze of corrugated metal buildings and empty lots, lit by sodium lamps that turned everything the color of old bruises. The Target warehouse sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. No lights, no visible security. But the lock on the gate was new, and tire tracks in the dirt suggested recent activity. Kovich's team cut the lock and moved in with tactical precision. Nikolai followed, weapon drawn despite the sling. Alara stayed close behind him, heart hammering against her ribs. The warehouse was massive, filled with rows of storage containers stacked 3 high. Somewhere in the darkness, water dripped. Metal creaked. The air smelled like rust and old oil. Kovic signaled his team to spread out, clearing the space systematically. Nikolai moved toward the back, where a section had been walled off with plywood and sheet metal. A door hung crooked on its hinges. He pushed it open. Inside was a room maybe 15 feet square, a mattress on the floor, empty water bottles, food wrappers. And in the corner, chained to a support beam, a young woman with dark hair and Mira's eyes. Katya Volkov looked up when they entered. She was thin, bruised, terrified, but alive. "Please," she whispered, "please don't hurt me." Nikolai holstered his weapon and crouched in front of her. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to take you home." "Who are you?" "My name is Nikolai Veyer. Your mother works for me." Katya's eyes widened. "My mother, is she?" "She's alive, she's safe, and she's going to be very happy to see you." He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and started working on the chain. Alara knelt beside Katya, touching her shoulder gently. "How long have you been here?" "I don't know. Weeks. A man took me from my apartment, kept me locked up. He said if I cooperated, he wouldn't kill me." Her voice broke. "Is it over? Is he gone?" "He's gone," Nikolai said. The chain broke free. "And you're safe now." He helped Katya to her feet. She swayed, weak from captivity. Alara supported her other side. They were halfway to the door when gunfire erupted outside. Nikolai shoved both women behind a storage container and drew his weapon. "Kovic, report." Static. Then, "Contact! Multiple hostiles, east perimeter. They were waiting for us." More gunfire, closer now. "It's a trap," Marcus said through the radio. "Silas must have had people watching the warehouse." Nikolai cursed. "How many?" "At least 10, maybe more. They've got us pinned." "Fall back to the vehicles. We'll extract through the west exit." "Boss, the west exit is blocked. They've boxed us in." Nikolai's expression went flat. He turned to Alara. "Take Katya. Get to the storage containers in the northeast corner. There's a maintenance exit. It'll dump you into the alley behind the building. Run for the main road and call for backup." "I'm not leaving you." "Alara, I said I'm not leaving you." A bullet punched through the plywood wall, missing Nikolai's head by inches. "Go!" he shouted. "Both of you. Now!" Alara grabbed Katya's hand and ran. They wove through the maze of containers, following the route Nikolai had described. Behind them, gunfire intensified, voices shouting, the sharp crack of rifles echoing through the cavernous space. The maintenance exit was a metal door painted to blend with the wall. Alara hit it with her shoulder. It didn't budge. "It's locked," Katya said. "Then we break it down." Alara kicked the door. Once. Twice. On the third kick, the lock gave way, and they stumbled into an alley thick with the smell of garbage and stagnant water. "This way," Alara said, pulling Katya toward the street. They made it 10 feet before a man stepped out from behind a dumpster. He was holding a gun, and he was looking directly at them. "Mrs. Veyer," he said pleasantly, "Silas thought you might try to run. He asked me to make sure you didn't get far." Alara stepped in front of Katya. "Who are you?" "No one important. Just a man following orders." He raised the gun. "Nothing personal." The shot echoed through the alley, but it wasn't Alara who fell. The man collapsed, a red stain spreading across his chest. Behind him, Victor lowered his rifle. "Move," he barked. "More coming." They ran. Victor led them through the maze of alleys, away from the warehouse, toward the sound of sirens in the distance. Behind them, gunfire continued to crack through the early morning air. Alara's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Beside her, Katya was flagging, stumbling over debris. "Almost there," Victor said. "Just a little—" Another gunshot. Victor went down. Alara skidded to a stop, reaching for him, but he waved her off. "Go. I'm fine. Just go." Blood was spreading across his thigh. He wasn't fine, but 4 more armed men were rounding the corner behind them. Alara made a choice. She grabbed Katya and ran, leaving Victor behind, and hated herself for it. They burst onto the main road just as police cars screamed past, heading for the warehouse. Alara flagged down a patrol car, shouting about hostages and gunmen and federal agents. The officer took one look at her blood-stained wedding dress, still wearing it, she realized absurdly, and called for backup. Within minutes, the street was flooded with police. FBI, Tactical teams. Agent Reeves appeared, taking charge of the scene. "Where's Vayer?" she demanded. "Still inside," Alara said. "With Kovic's team. They're pinned down." Reeves started issuing orders. Alara stood in the middle of the chaos, Katya clinging to her arm, and watched as armed agents poured into the warehouse. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Silence fell. Alara counted seconds, then minutes, waiting for Nikolai to emerge. When he finally walked out, supported by Marcus, blood on his clothes and exhaustion carved into every line of his face, she ran to him. He caught her with his good arm and held on like she was the only thing keeping him upright. "Is she safe?" he asked. "Katya's safe. Victor's hit but alive. Your team?" "3 wounded, none dead." He pulled back to look at her. "We got lucky." "That wasn't luck. That was you refusing to quit." "I quit plenty of things, just not you." Alara kissed him, tasting copper and smoke and the particular flavor of a man who'd just survived another impossible situation. When she pulled back, Agent Reeves was standing beside them. "We've secured the warehouse, found evidence linking this location to at least a dozen other crimes. Silas's operation is finished." "Good," Nikolai said. "And Mira Volkov's daughter is in federal custody. She'll need medical attention, but she's alive." "I want her reunited with her mother." Reeves hesitated. "Mira is facing serious charges." "I know, but she cooperated. She gave you Silas, and she deserves to see her daughter." Nikolai's voice was firm. "Make it happen." Reeves studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. "I'll see what I can do." She walked away, already on her phone. Nikolai looked at Alara. "Take me home. I'm done fighting for today." "You're done fighting for the next 6 weeks. Doctor's orders." "I'll rest when I'm dead." "You almost were. Multiple times. So now you're going to rest, recover, and let me take care of you for once." He smiled. It was tired and real and absolutely genuine. "Yes, ma'am." They went home. Muktag. The penthouse felt different, quieter. The security team had been halved after the losses at the warehouse. The rooms echoed. Mira was gone, taken into federal custody pending trial. Her belongings had been removed. The kitchen she'd commanded for 15 years stood empty. Alara made coffee herself for the first time in months. It tasted wrong. Nikolai sat at the dining table, arms still in the sling, staring at nothing. "She saved her daughter," Alara said quietly. "She nearly got you killed doing it." "But she didn't. We're both alive. Katya's alive. That counts for something." "Does it?" Nikolai's voice was hollow. 7 people died at our wedding because I trusted someone I shouldn't have." "You trusted someone for 15 years who never betrayed you until she was forced to choose between her child and everything else. That's not the same as blind trust." "It feels the same." Alara set down her coffee and crossed to him. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You're not responsible for what Silas did. You're not responsible for Mira's impossible choice. You're responsible for saving Katya, stopping Silas, and keeping me alive through all of it. That's what I'm going to remember about our wedding. That it turned into a war zone? That you married me anyway? In the middle of chaos and violence, you stood there and promised to love me forever, and then you proved it by fighting like hell to make sure we had a forever to live." Nikolai's eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were wet. "I love you," he said. "I know. I love you too. Even after all this? Especially after all this." He pulled her down onto his lap, careful of his injured shoulder, and held her while the sun came up over Boston Harbor, turning the water gold. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, betrayal from within, and an enemy who'd wanted nothing more than to destroy them. They'd survived. And somewhere in federal custody, Silas Crown sat in a cell, knowing he'd lost everything, while Nikolai and Alara sat in their home, planning the future he'd tried to steal. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Alara sat in the federal courthouse gallery every single day, watching as prosecutors methodically dismantled Silas Crown's empire piece by piece. Trafficking charges, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering. The evidence was overwhelming, built from Mira's testimony, financial records, and the physical evidence recovered from the warehouse where Katya had been held. Silas sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, face blank. He never looked at the gallery. never acknowledged Alara's presence, but she felt his awareness of her like static electricity in the air. Nikolai didn't attend. His shoulder was healing slowly, requiring physical therapy 3 times a week and enough pain that he finally started taking medication. But the real reason he stayed away was simpler. He didn't trust himself in the same room with Silas. Not with guards watching, not with cameras recording, not with the possibility that he might do something that would land him in federal custody alongside the man he hated. So Alara went in his place, bearing witness to the systematic destruction of the person who'd tried to murder them on their wedding day. On the 14th day of testimony, Mira took the stand. She looked smaller in the witness box, diminished by the weight of what she'd done. Her hair had gone completely gray in the 6 weeks since the wedding. Her hands shook when she placed them on the Bible to swear her oath. The prosecutor was gentle with her, walking through the timeline of her recruitment by Silas, the threats against Katya, the intelligence she'd provided. Mira answered each question in a voice barely above a whisper, tears streaming down her face. When it was the defense attorney's turn, he went for the throat. "Mrs. Volkov, you claim you were coerced into betraying Mr. Vare, but isn't it true that you've held a grudge against him for 15 years? That you blamed him for your husband's incarceration?" "No," Mira said. "My husband deserved what he got. Nikolai was just doing his job." "Then why work for the man who put your husband in prison?" "Because I needed employment. Because he paid well and treated me with respect. Because over 15 years I came to care about him." "And yet you betrayed him." Mira's voice broke. "To save my daughter. I would do it again if I had to." The defense attorney smiled. "So you admit that given the same circumstances, you would once again conspire with my client to facilitate an attack on innocent people?" "I would do anything to protect my child. Wouldn't you?" The attorney had no answer for that. When Mira stepped down from the stand, she looked directly at Alara for the first time since the arrest. Her eyes were red, pleading, desperate for some sign of forgiveness. Alara looked away. She wasn't ready yet. Maybe she never would be. The verdict came back on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Silas Crown would spend the rest of his life in federal prison without possibility of parole. The judge had been unequivocal in his sentencing remarks, calling Silas a danger to society and a predator who'd shown no remorse for the lives he'd destroyed. Mira received a different sentence, 10 years in federal prison, with credit for time served in cooperation with authorities. With good behavior, she'd be eligible for parole in 7. Katya was in the courtroom when her mother's sentence was read. She wept openly, but there was relief in the tears too. Her mother was alive. Her mother would eventually come home. Alara found Katya in the hallway after the proceedings concluded. The young woman looked exhausted, hollowed out by weeks of testimony and medical examinations and the slow realization that she'd been used as a pawn in someone else's war. "How are you holding up?" Alara asked. Katya managed a weak smile. "I'm alive. That's more than I expected 6 weeks ago. Your mother loves you very much. I know, I just wish she'd trusted someone to help instead of trying to handle it alone. She was trying to protect you the only way she knew how." "By helping a monster destroy good people?" Katya's voice was bitter. "I love my mother, but what she did was wrong. I know she had reasons, but that doesn't make it right." Alara couldn't argue with that. She'd had the same conversation with herself 100 times since learning about Mira's betrayal. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Go back to Providence, try to rebuild my life. The nonprofit is holding my position, and I need to work. Need to do something that matters." Katya hesitated. "I wanted to thank you for coming to find me, for convincing Nikolai to look when he had every reason to let me die. He's not the kind of man who lets innocent people die, even when they're connected to someone who hurt him. He's better than people think." "I know." Katya touched Alara's arm. "Tell him I'm sorry for what my mother did, for the people who died, for all of it. You didn't do anything wrong. I was still the reason. That's enough." She walked away before Alara could respond, disappearing into the crowd of reporters and federal agents clogging the courthouse steps. Alara watched her go and felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling across her shoulders. Mira had chosen to save her daughter. Nikolai had chosen to save Alara. Katya was choosing to carry guilt that didn't belong to her. Everyone was just trying to protect the people they loved, and the collateral damage kept spreading like cracks in glass. Nikolai was waiting in the penthouse when Alara returned. He'd been cooking, something he rarely did, but his shoulder was healing and he needed to prove to himself that he could still function independently. The kitchen smelled like garlic and wine and something roasting in the oven. "They convicted him," Alara said. Nikolai didn't turn from the stove. "I know. Marcus texted me the verdict. Life without parole." "Good." Alara set down her bag and crossed to where he stood, stirring something in a pan with his good hand. "Do you feel better, knowing he's locked up?" "I feel like justice was served. That's different from feeling better." "What would make you feel better?" Nikolai was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Knowing that you're safe, that we can move forward without looking over our shoulders, that the next time we plan a wedding, it won't end in a firefight." "The next time?" Alara couldn't help smiling. "You want to get married again?" "We never had a reception, never had a honeymoon, never had a single day that was just about us celebrating instead of surviving." He turned to face her. "So yes, I want to do it again, properly this time." "When?" "Whenever you're ready. Next month. Next year. I'm not in a hurry, as long as I know it's happening." Alara wrapped her arms around his waist, careful of the sling he'd finally been cleared to remove next week. "I'm ready now. I've been ready since the first ceremony, the one with the explosions and the federal agents and your blood on my dress. That's a low bar for wedding standards. Maybe. But it was ours. And I wouldn't change it even if I could." Nikolai kissed her forehead. "You're insane." "I married a mafia boss in the middle of a war zone. Insane is pretty much a requirement." They ate dinner at the kitchen island, talking about nothing and everything. The weather, the news, Marcus's new girlfriend, who Victor claimed was a federal plant. The physical therapy exercises Nikolai hated but admitted were helping. Normal things. Couple things. The kind of conversation that had nothing to do with violence or betrayal or the weight of choices made under duress. After dinner, Nikolai pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on the counter. "What's that?" Alara asked. "Open it." She did. Inside was a deed, property transfer documents, legal papers transferring ownership of a building on Newberry Street, right beside the library where she worked, into her name. Alara stared at the documents, not quite processing what she was seeing. "You bought me a building?" "I bought you the space to open the rare bookshop you mentioned wanting, back when we first started having dinner together. You said if you could do anything, you'd open a shop dedicated to preserving old books and making them accessible to people who loved stories." "I remember. But that was just a dream. I didn't think—" "I want you to have your dreams." Nikolai's voice was quiet, serious. "I want you to have a life that's yours, work that matters to you, a future that isn't defined by my world." Alara's throat tightened. "I don't need a building to have a future." "No, but you deserve one anyway. So take it. Open your shop, fill it with books and stories and everything that made you fall in love with words in the first place. Build something beautiful." She looked at him, this man who'd caught her when she was falling and had been finding new ways to catch her ever since. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Just promise you'll be happy." "I already am." She kissed him, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like they weren't stealing moments between crises. They were just two people who loved each other, standing in a kitchen, making plans for a future that finally felt possible. 3 months later, Alara stood in front of the building on Newberry Street and watched contractors install the sign above the door. Bren and Veyer Rare Books. The shop had taken shape slowly, built from her vision and Nikolai's quiet support. Mahogany shelving, leather reading chairs, temperature-controlled rooms for the most delicate volumes. A small cafe in the back corner where customers could drink coffee and lose themselves in stories. It opened on a Saturday in July, warm and bright, with a line of people stretching down the block. Book lovers, collectors, curious neighbors. The literary community had embraced the shop before it even opened, drawn by Alara's reputation as an archivist and the carefully curated collection she'd assembled. Nikolai stood behind the register, ringing up purchases with his left hand. The right was still recovering, gaining strength, but not quite back to full function. He looked out of place among the books and the literary crowd. This man in his expensive suit with his hard edges and his ice-blue eyes that had seen too much darkness. But he smiled when a customer thanked him for recommending a title, and he listened with genuine interest when an elderly woman explained why she collected first editions of mystery novels. And when a child asked if they had any books about dragons, he walked her to the right section himself and helped her choose 3. Elara watched from across the shop and felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This strange, improbable life they'd built together. Her world and his, overlapping in unexpected ways. At noon, Marcus appeared with lunch from the Italian place 2 blocks over. He'd been promoted to head of security after Victor had taken a position managing Nikolai's operations in Providence. The new role suited him. He'd always been better with strategy than tactics. "How's business?" he asked, setting containers of pasta on the small table in the back office. "Good," Elara said. "We've sold more in 4 hours than I projected for the full day." "That's what happens when you know what you're doing." Marcus opened his container and inhaled the steam. "Nikolai's taking bets on how long before you expand to a second location. Tell him to focus on his own business empire and let me handle mine." "I'll tell him you said that. He'll laugh." They ate lunch while customers browsed, and Nikolai managed the register with the same focus he applied to everything else. When a rare book dealer arrived with a collection to appraise, Elara spent an hour examining volumes and negotiating prices, while Nikolai watched from the doorway, learning the vocabulary of her world the way she'd learned the vocabulary of his. By the time they closed at 6, Elara was exhausted and exhilarated. She locked the door, counted the register, and found Nikolai in the back room stacking boxes. "That was incredible," she said. "You were incredible. I just stood at a register and looked intimidating. You recommended 3 books to customers who ended up buying 5 each. That's sales skill. I read the descriptions you wrote. Made it easy." Elara crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Thank you for this, for believing I could do it. I always believed you could do it. You just needed the space to try." They stood there in the quiet shop, surrounded by stories and the smell of old paper and new possibilities. "Nikolai," Elara said quietly, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "The wedding, the real one. The do-over we talked about." He pulled back to look at her. "Have you changed your mind?" "No, I want to move it up. I don't want to wait. I want to marry you again as soon as possible." "Any particular reason for the urgency?" "Because we've survived everything the universe threw at us, and I'm tired of planning for someday. I want now. I want to stand in front of the people we love and promise you forever without worrying about who might try to stop us." Nikolai's smile was slow and genuine. "When? Next month. Small ceremony? Just family and close friends? No massive security operation. No fortress venue. Just us." "Where?" "Here." Elara gestured to the bookshop. "Surrounded by stories. It feels right." Nikolai looked around the space, the shelves, the chairs, the cafe tables, the windows letting in afternoon light. Then he looked back at her. "It's perfect. Autet." They were married on a Sunday evening in August, with 30 people gathered among the bookshelves and the setting sun painting everything gold through the windows. Elara wore a simple dress, cream silk and lace, nothing like the elaborate gown from the first ceremony. Nikolai wore a dark suit without the jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, the last traces of his injury hidden beneath fabric. There was no judge this time. Marcus had gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose, which Nikolai claimed was the most absurd thing his head of security had ever done. But Marcus took it seriously, standing in front of them with a notebook full of handwritten vows and observations about love and survival. "Marriage," Marcus began, "is choosing someone and then choosing them again every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Nikolai and Elara have already proven they can survive the worst. Now they get to prove they can build the best." He looked at Nikolai. "Your vows." Nikolai took Elara's hands. His grip was steady. "I caught you when you were falling, and you've been catching me ever since. You've seen the darkest parts of who I am and stayed anyway. You've stood beside me through violence and betrayal and more close calls than I can count. And you've never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am." His voice roughened slightly. "I promise to protect you, not because you need protecting, but because loving you means standing between you and anything that would hurt you. I promise to support your dreams, even when they're different from mine. I promise to be honest, even when the truth is ugly. And I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I'm breathing. Alara's vision blurred. She blinked back tears. Your turn, Marcus said gently. She took a breath. When I collapsed in that grocery store, I was broken, starving, terrified. And you didn't just catch me, you rebuilt me, piece by piece, day by day, until I remembered what it felt like to be whole. Her voice steadied. You're not a safe choice. You're not easy. But you're real. And you're mine. And I choose you knowing exactly what that means. I promise to love all of you. The darkness and the devotion, the violence and the gentleness, the man who saves people and the man who destroys threats without hesitation. I promise to build a life with you that's ours, not defined by fear or danger or what other people think we should be. And I promise to remind you every day that you're more than the worst things you've done. Nikolai's eyes were bright. Marcus smiled. Rings! They exchanged the same platinum bands from the first ceremony, still bearing the scratches and dents from everything they'd survived. By the power vested in me by the internet and the state of Massachusetts, Marcus said, I now pronounce you, again, husband and wife. Nikolai, kiss your bride before something explodes. The gathering laughed. Nikolai kissed Alara like they had all the time in the world. And for once, they did. The reception was champagne and hors d'oeuvres and conversations that lasted long into the night. Victor gave a speech about loyalty. Kovic showed up unannounced with a gift, a first edition Hemingway that probably cost more than Alara's car. Even Agent Reeves appeared briefly, congratulating them and noting that this ceremony had significantly less federal paperwork than the last one. At midnight, when the guests had finally left and the shop was quiet again, Nikolai and Alara sat in the reading chairs by the window, shoes off, ties loosened, exhausted and happy. No gunfire, Alara observed. No federal agents. No betrayals. Just us. Just us, she agreed. Nikolai pulled an envelope from his pocket. I have something for you. Wedding gift. You already gave me a building. This is different. She opened it. Inside were 2 tickets to Iceland and a printout of a remote cabin reservation. 2 weeks in September, no cell service, no email, just mountains and hot springs and distance from everything. Our honeymoon, Nikolai said, the one we never got. Alara's throat tightened. You booked this months ago. I booked it the day after the first wedding. I knew we'd get here eventually. Just took longer than expected. Will your empire survive without you for 2 weeks? Marcus can handle it, and if he can't, it'll still be there when we get back. But this, he gestured between them. This is more important than any business I run. Alara leaned over and kissed him. I love you. I love you too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city through the bookshop windows, and Alara thought about the path that had led them here. From a grocery store collapse to a building full of stories. From terror and starvation to safety and abundance. From a woman who'd been invisible to everyone to a woman who'd been seen, truly seen, by the one person who mattered most. Nikolai, she said quietly, do you ever regret it, helping me that day? Never. Not once. Even with everything that happened, the violence, the betrayal, the wedding that turned into a war zone. Especially because of all that, it proved that what we have is strong enough to survive anything. He took her hand. I spent most of my life believing I was too damaged to deserve happiness. That the things I'd done disqualified me from normal life. Then you fell into my arms and looked at me like I was someone worth trusting, and everything changed. You were always worth trusting. You just needed someone to see it. You see too much. I see exactly enough. Nikolai smiled. How did I get this lucky? You caught a falling woman instead of letting her hit the ground. Everything else followed from that choice. Best choice I ever made. Second best, Alara corrected. The best was proposing. Fair point. They stayed in the bookshop until almost 2 a.m, talking about the honeymoon and the shop and the future they were building together. When they finally locked up and headed home, the streets were empty and quiet, the city sleeping around them. In the car, Alara leaned against Nikolai's shoulder and felt peace settle through her bones. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of someone who chose to struggle alongside you. Not perfection, but partnership. Not safety from the world, but safety with each other. "Hey," Nikolai said softly. "You awake?" "Barely. I need to tell you something." Alara opened her eyes. "What?" "I'm done with the more dangerous parts of what I do. I'm transitioning everything to legitimate businesses. Marcus and Victor are handling the exit strategy." She sat up. "When did you decide this?" "The day I woke up from surgery and realized I'd almost died before getting to have a life with you. I don't want to spend our marriage waiting for the next threat. I want to spend it building something better." "That's a big change." "It is. But you're worth it. We're worth it." Alara studied his face in the dim light from the dashboard. "You're sure? This has been your whole life." "You're my whole life now. The rest is just business, and business can change." She kissed him, tasting the promise of the future in the press of his mouth against hers. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Don't be proud yet. Ask me again in a year when I'm complaining about how boring legitimate business is. I'll remind you that boring is what we're aiming for." "Boring and happy?" "Yes. Boring and happy and alive." They drove home through the sleeping city, and Alara felt the last pieces of fear release their grip on her chest. They'd survived. They'd fought their way through betrayal and violence and impossible odds. And they'd come out the other side changed but whole, damaged but healing, stronger for the breaking and the mending. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, Alara stood in the bookshop and stared at the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 pink lines. She'd suspected for a week, but had been afraid to confirm it. Afraid of what it meant to bring a child into the world she and Nikolai inhabited. Afraid of the vulnerability, the new kind of fear, the ways a baby would change everything. But staring at those 2 lines, she felt something else entirely. Joy. Terrifying, overwhelming, absolute joy. The shop door opened. Nikolai stepped inside, shaking snow from his coat. He'd been at a meeting with lawyers about the final transfer of his less legitimate holdings to Victor. The transition was nearly complete. Another few weeks and he'd be entirely clean. He looked up and saw her face. "What's wrong?" Alara held up the test. Nikolai crossed the shop in 3 strides. He took the test from her hand, stared at it, and then looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Wonder and fear and hope all tangled together. "You're pregnant." "I'm pregnant." How do you feel about that?" Alara laughed. It came out shaky. Terrified, happy, completely unprepared. "We'll figure it out." Nikolai pulled her against him, careful and gentle. "We've figured out everything else. A baby is different. A baby is the best different." Alara pressed her face against his chest, breathing in cedar and snow and the scent that meant home. "I'm scared." "Me too." "What if we mess this up?" "Then we'll mess it up together and figure out how to fix it. That's what we do." She pulled back to look at him. "You're really okay with this?" "I'm more than okay. He stopped, searching for words. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a life that wasn't just survival and violence, and now I have all of it, with you." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," he confirmed. They stood in the bookshop, surrounded by stories of other people's lives and futures, and began imagining their own. That night, they told Marcus over dinner. He immediately started making lists of security protocols for pregnant women and infants. Nikolai told him to relax. Marcus ignored him and kept writing. They told Victor over video call. He threatened to come back to Boston to help with protection details. Nikolai told him to focus on Providence. Victor said he'd do both. They didn't tell the media, didn't announce it publicly. This was theirs, private and precious, something to protect from the world that had already tried to destroy them too many times. Months passed. The baby grew. Alara's body changed. The bookshop thrived. Nikolai's business transition completed without incident. They moved out of the penthouse and into a brownstone in Back Bay with a yard and room for a nursery. They painted the nursery pale yellow, gender neutral. They didn't want to know if it was a boy or girl. wanted the surprise, the moment of discovery when everything changed. In September, exactly a year after their second wedding, Alara went into labor at 3 in the morning. Nikolai drove them to the hospital with the practiced calm of someone who'd survived actual warfare. Labor was just another kind of battle, longer, messier, but ultimately winnable. 17 hours later, their daughter was born. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Dark hair, blue eyes that would probably change color, tiny fists and a cry that sounded like outrage at being evicted from her comfortable home. The nurse placed her in Alara's arms, and the world narrowed to just this: the weight of her daughter against her chest, Nikolai's hand on her shoulder, the peculiar feeling of being completely terrified and absolutely certain at the same time. "She's perfect," Nikolai whispered. "She's ours," Alara corrected. They named her Mira, not to forgive what had happened, but to remember that people were complicated, that good people made terrible choices for love, that redemption was possible even when forgiveness was hard. Mira Volkov was still in prison. She'd sent a letter when she heard about the pregnancy, offering congratulations and apologies and hope that someday Alara might let her meet her namesake. Alara hadn't answered yet. Maybe someday she would. Maybe someday the anger would fade enough to allow complicated grace. But for now, she held her daughter and watched Nikolai lean over them both. This man who'd built an empire on violence and was rebuilding it on love, and felt the story complete itself. She'd gone to a grocery store for milk and bread. She'd found forever, not the easy kind, not the safe kind, but the kind that survived explosions and betrayals and federal investigations, the kind that grew stronger for being tested, the kind that proved, again and again, that home wasn't always found in gentle places. Sometimes it appeared in the arms of a feared man with a guarded heart, a ruthless past, and a love strong enough to rewrite an entire life. Marcus arrived an hour later with flowers and a stuffed bear that was bigger than the baby. Victor called from Providence, demanding photos every hour. Agent Reeves sent a card. Kovich sent another first edition, this time a children's book, inscribed with a note about raising warriors. And in a prison cell 300 miles away, Mira Volkov received word that she had a granddaughter who bore her name, and wept with something that felt like redemption, even if it wasn't quite forgiveness. The nurses eventually kicked everyone out except Nikolai. He sat in the chair beside the hospital bed, holding his daughter with the same careful precision he applied to everything important, and stared at her like she was the most miraculous thing he'd ever seen. "I used to think my life was already written," he said quietly, "that I'd made too many dark choices to deserve anything good, and then you fell into my arms and proved me wrong." Alara reached for his hand. "We proved each other wrong." "Yeah, we did." Little Mira made a sound, not quite a cry, more like a question, and Nikolai adjusted his hold, finding the rhythm instinctively. "I promise you," he said to his daughter, "I will make sure your life is nothing like mine was. You'll grow up safe, loved, protected, and you'll never have to wonder if you're worth saving." Alara's throat tightened. "She already knows. She has you. She has us. Yes, she has us." They sat in the quiet hospital room, the three of them, and Alara thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a grocery store floor to a hospital bed, from starvation and terror to abundance and joy, from two broken people to a family. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean. It had been messy and violent and complicated and real. But it had been worth it. Every impossible choice, every close call, every moment of fear and doubt, and fighting for what mattered. All of it had led here, to this room, this moment, this perfect small person who represented the future they'd fought so hard to build. Outside the window, Boston glowed in the darkness. The city where they'd met, where they'd survived, where they'd built a life from the wreckage of two separate stories that had collided and fused into something stronger than either had been alone. Nikolai looked up from their daughter and met Alara's eyes. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." It was simple, true. The foundation everything else was built on, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end. A personal note. This is a story about falling and being caught, about choosing love in the middle of chaos, About the truth that sometimes the most dangerous people are the safest ones to fall for, because they understand that protection isn't about control. It's about standing beside someone and saying, "Nothing gets through me to hurt you." Alara went to a grocery store weak and terrified, hiding bruises under expensive fabric, starving because someone else controlled her access to food. She fell, and Nikolai caught her. Not because he wanted to own her, but because he refused to watch another person suffer when he had the power to help. That single choice, to catch instead of let fall, changed everything. Love isn't always found in safe places. Sometimes it's found in the arms of complicated people who've done terrible things for what they believed were the right reasons. Sometimes it grows in the space between darkness and light, fed by honesty instead of pretense. Nikolai never pretended to be good. He told Alara exactly what he was: a man with blood on his hands, enemies in the shadows, and a personal vendetta against anyone who hurt the helpless. And she chose him anyway, not despite the darkness, but because he wielded it with purpose. Their story is messy, it's violent, it's complicated, it's real, because real love isn't about perfection. It's about seeing someone completely, all their scars and sharp edges and beautiful broken parts, and choosing them, again and again, through explosions and betrayals and federal investigations, through pregnancy and parenthood and the slow, hard work of building something that lasts. Mira's betrayal hurt because it was born from love. She chose her daughter over everything, just as Nikolai would have chosen Alara, just as any parent would choose their child. There are no villains in this story, only people making impossible choices with incomplete information and hearts full of fear. Even Silas, in his own twisted way, believed he was owed revenge for what he'd lost. He was wrong. His actions were monstrous, but he was still human, still operating from the same basic drive that motivated everyone else, the desire to protect what he believed was his. The difference is in how we choose to protect. Silas chose cruelty. Nikolai chose controlled violence aimed at those who deserved it. Mira chose betrayal to save her child. Alara chose to stand beside a dangerous man and trust him with her life. All choices, all consequences. In the end, the measure of a person isn't whether they've made mistakes or done dark things. It's whether they're willing to change, to grow, to become better for the sake of the people they love. Nikolai walked away from his criminal empire not because the law forced him, but because Alara gave him a reason to want something different. A life, a family, a future that wasn't just survival. That's the real victory in this story. Not the defeats of enemies or the survival of attacks, but the choice to build something beautiful from the wreckage of two broken lives. If you've ever felt invisible, remember, you're not. Somewhere, someone will see you, really see you. And when you fall, they'll catch you. And everything after that is just two people choosing each other every day through whatever comes. Thank you for reading our story. May you find your own version of being caught when you need it most. And may you have the courage to catch others when they fall. With hope for all who choose love in the chaos, the end.